Welcome, everybody, to the BRICKYARD podcast, Week 13 recap, going over all the games, all the calls, dare I say, starting with the Thursday game with the Seahawks and the Cowboys, ending it with Monday Night Football against our teams here. So we're here to break it all down, go over all of the games, and then some, going over the playoff race, MVP race, and all the other races included.
Yeah, so we're going over all of the races included right now, and we were watching Thursday Night Football, and I'm typically a person that likes watching with the sound down a little bit, kind of gives you a better feel for what's going on in the game, the momentum shifts in the game, but this game, we couldn't help but turn the sound up during this game because of the incredible roasts from Al Michaels, and I was someone who was pretty disappointed when Chris Collinsworth and Al Michaels got separated, but I think it is a necessity for the NFL to have these guys on two different broadcasts because Chris Collinsworth on one broadcast will completely roast the refs unapologetically because he's old at this point. He's like, what do I care? You're going to fire me. What do I have to lose? I'm just going to go hang out. You're going to probably slide my son in there eventually because he's just as awesome and happy and go lucky as I am. And then Al Michaels on the stream, also there ripping the refs to shreds on this game. And he was like, oh my God. Another flag, and he's like, here we go. Oh, is there a play where we don't have laundry on the play? I am shocked. And it really came down to the Dallas Cowboys having a drive where they gained 15 yards from scrimmage, and you're like, okay, they only gained 15 yards. What'd they get from like their 25 to the 50? Maybe you get a call in there somewhere. No, they went all the way from their
75 yards. 60 was laundry on the play.
60 was laundry on the play. So this game was one of the most entertaining games of the year. However, it's like every other call was just the refs. And I think the biggest one was that Reek Woolen penalty where he's going down the field and it was pretty ticky-tack with CeeDee Lamb. And you can't help but think this was a game where Seattle, if they win this game, you look at their games going forward from here, they would have the tiebreaker from the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys have a really tough stretch of games coming up here where I believe they play the Bills, they play the Philadelphia Eagles this week. So realistically, the Seattle Seahawks had a chance to not only have 5 losses on the scoreboard and separate themselves out of this cluster of 6-6 teams, but they would have had a chance to overtake the Cowboys for the 6th seed in this game. So it's like, with all of that being said, and then the refs like penalty, 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 penalty. It's like every other play in this game. And like, it seemed like the Seattle Seahawks were trying to test, like, are you going to call a penalty on every single play? Well, apparently this ref crew was like, yeah, we are going to call a penalty on every single play on this drive.
It was so frustrating for me because they outgained 11 teams this week in penalty yards, just in this game. 257 penalty yards. Now, in an average game, maybe it's like 80 to 100 on both sides, like whatever. But this game, every single call. And this is my problem that I've had with the NFL the last 2 years. Ever since they started partnering with DraftKings and FanDuel and all these other gambling sites, something feels weird in the air. And I'm not here to say that this game was rigged, but if it was, the recipe's right there. I mean, the second half drive for the Cowboys, penalty, penalty, penalty. First down from CeeDee Lamb, penalty, 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 all the way into the end zone. And if I was the Seahawks, which I know Pete Carroll complained about it vehemently after the game, I'd be pissed because I feel like they lost this game, not because of the Cowboys, because I think they played a great game against them overall. Their offense moved a lot better than they've done the last 3 games. But, like, if I was the Cowboys, I would feel slighted. Not the Cowboys, the Seahawks in this game. I would feel slighted because this is a game they had to win. Now, they're still in the mix. They can still make the playoffs, but they definitely needed this win. The Cowboys, it feels like, biggest brand, NFL. They're trying to compete for the Eagles for that division as well. Yep. And it felt like the NFL was really, really pushing for the Cowboys to win this game. And the Cowboys, they had a lot of missed opportunities in this game. They ended up with the win. Give them credit there. But this game felt very wonky, very weird. It felt like something was behind the shadows in this game.
Yeah, it definitely felt like there was something afoot in this game. And however, it felt like the Seattle Seahawks did play the better game overall. I do give credit for the Dallas Cowboys for winning this game, but now that we have the refs out of the way, I'm not someone who wants to complain about the refs because the Seattle Seahawks did have opportunities to win this game. You had a situation at the end of the half where you marched the ball down the field and got the touchdown. So you did have a chance to do that at the end of this game. However, the main talking point coming into this game is DaRon Bland the most valuable non-quarterback in the NFL this year. And I was like, Deron Bland, a corner. Let's see. And then he gets annihilated for what was that? He gave up 135, 160.
157 yards. And DK had that 75-yard bomb. Part of that was DK. DK's a freak of nature. We already know that. But he got cooked on every single pass towards his way, completely killing his Defensive Player of the Year argument, which was honestly from the start fraudulent. No offense to Deron Bland. I like him as a player. I think he's a good corner overall, but he's not Defensive Player of the Year. You have Myles Garrett. You have TJ Watt. You can even throw in someone like a Danielle Hunter. He's had a lot of sacks as well. Like he's
Fred
not
Warner.
changing the game. Yeah. Fred Warner.
Nick Bosa.
You can throw away all these other guys. He's been cooked. This game's over. He's not Defensive Player of the Year. I get he's a cowboy. I get he's a corner. We love him. I know we loved Trayvon Diggs a couple years ago when he had 14 interceptions, but wasn't Defensive Player of the Year. This was the media pushing him as Defensive Player of the Year and him killing his case immediately.
Yeah, he killed his case immediately. And then I think, did he give up 157 yards, or is that not including the penalties he gave up? Because I do know he had like a 65-yard pass interference in this game as well.
That doesn't include that.
Yeah, it doesn't even include the penalties. So you factor in pass interference, and it's just hilarious. Everyone's talking about Deron Bland. Then as soon as everyone is hyping him up, then he has one of the worst games from a corner
of the week.
Yeah.
It was heinous, and now that argument's completely gone. I don't know why he was in the conversation to begin with. I get he has a lot of pick sixes, but that's 5 plays all season. You got the touchdown. Congratulations. But at the end of the day, there's all these other guys that you're disrespecting when you're putting him in that conversation as a front runner.
Yeah, the most value
This is the year that if a non-quarterback doesn't win this year, they're never going to win another MVP. You're not going to see a running back win, wide receiver, or a defensive player ever win again. It's going to become a quarterback award.
The most valuable non-quarterback in the league. Like, can we look at someone like Tyreek Hill, who's on pace still for 2,500 yards, which is absolutely ridiculous. I believe he's going to shatter Megatron's record.
Right now, he's on pace for 2,050 yards. He has more touchdowns. He has more receptions. He's on pace to annihilate Megatron's record. And I think at this point, I mean, they keep trying to prop up a quarterback for the MVP. There was Jalen Hurts last week. And then in the past, they had, Patrick Mahomes in the mix and all that. Now they're popping up Brock Purdy, who I love Brock Purdy, but I don't think he's the MVP. We have Tyreek Hill here.
Yeah, it's going to become a quarterback award. And then you have that happen with Deron Bland. And then in this game, my main problem with the Seattle Seahawks is you have DK Metcalf. And while he did have that monster first half, whenever they needed a play in the second half, I didn't see Geno Smith look his way once. It's like you have DK Metcalf having one of the best games a wide receiver has had all season. And then when you needed a play the last few drives there, they didn't even look DK Metcalf's way. They're looking towards Noah Fant. He ends up having that drop, kind of on Geno, kind of on him. It was a bad throw. You're looking towards players like Jackson Smith and Jigba, players like Will Dissly. It's like, why wasn't DK Metcalf targeted at all? Why weren't we trying to get him on a slant, trying to get a bubble screen going? Why weren't we trying to scheme DK Metcalf open? Like, that's my main problem with the Seattle Seahawks is you have DK Metcalf going off, and then on that massive play that he had when he broke it open, I looked at him and I was like, oh my God, DK Metcalf looks like he's the same size as Micah Parsons here. Like, he looks like he's the size of a linebacker, and he's towering over Deron Bland. It's like, even if they're doubling him, someone else should be open here. It's like, we can't look his way once. And then at the end of the game, you let Micah Parsons on 4th down run unimpeded to the quarterback. What the hell was that?
Yeah, that was a horrible play call. And I do think that DK would benefit in a different situation. I like him in Seattle. I like Pete Carroll and everything, but I think that you put him in a situation like with Kansas City, you put him somewhere even with Buffalo if Stephon Diggs decides to leave, you put him somewhere, maybe the Chargers could use him if they move on from Keenan Allen. Like, there's situations elsewhere where I think his game would completely elevate, because right now I feel like he's not acclimated the way he should be, because he's a guy, talent-wise, you could put him top 10, top 5 if you want to, because any given day, he can go for 150 yards like a Jamar Chase, Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson. And I feel like his situation in Seattle is not the best for him.
Yeah, it's not the best for him, but it's like, my point is like, just give him a chance. Like, you can't look his way once. Like, you're in 4-down territory. You have 1st, 2nd, 3rd down here. Like, why aren't we looking towards DK Metcalf's way, who's towering over all of the corners here? He's someone who, even if he's in double coverage, you should just give him a chance to go up there and make a play.
Because he's also one of those guys, when it comes to 50-50 balls, he's going to get it there 60-70% of the time.
Yeah.
So I think they're really underutilizing him in this game. But Cowboys win. Now they're 1 game behind the Eagles. They're looking like they're going to lock into that 5 seed as we predicted. Do you see them potentially overseeing the Eagles at any point?
Potentially, yeah, I could, because the Eagles have been going through so many heavyweight fights. It's like we went from Cowboys to Chiefs to Bills, and you could tell they were kind of gassed in that 49ers game. The 49ers had an extra week of rest, I believe, because they had that Thursday night game versus the Seattle Seahawks. So they had some extra time to prepare versus the Philadelphia Eagles. So I do think that the Cowboys have been the best home team in the league this year. So they have a chance to go out there, beat the Philadelphia Eagles, and it'll be if the Eagles have enough in the tank there. But the other point you could also argue is, what does the Chiefs, Bills, and 49ers game all have in common for the Philadelphia Eagles? They were all played outside, cold weather environments in the rain here. So are the Philadelphia Eagles going to finally get to a dome and be like, oh, we actually have room to run here, because it's not a torrential downpour like it has been the past 3 weeks. So I think that the Philadelphia Eagles lose this week, there's a potential to lose out on the division. However, the Cowboys do have a tough stretch here where they could go out versus a team like the Buffalo Bills, who I think is playing for something. They're playing for their playoff hopes, where the Cowboys are kind of locked into that 5th seed. So I think there is a chance they could beat the Philadelphia Eagles, but I think down the stretch here, the Eagles have a little bit of an easier schedule and they're letting up. But every single week for the Eagles has been a heavyweight fight, where every single week for the Cowboys, it's like, okay, this has been impressive. You're blowing teams out and you're beating the teams you should beat. And the Seattle team was tough, but that was a team with a winning record. Now they're 500. It's like, okay, when you compare Jalen Hurts and Dak Prescott, sure, is Dak Prescott having a better year? Yes, but you also have to look at the toughness of the competition that they've been going up against. And the Cowboys, who have they really played here? Not too many players. And if that's what DK Metcalf is going to do, AJ Brown's having a better year than him. Devontae Smith, he's been better than Jackson Smith and Jigba this year. So I do think that the Philadelphia Eagles are a better team, just because if the Cowboys went through the stretch where they're playing the Chiefs, the Bills, and then you have the Cowboys, and now you have to play the Cowboys again, I think it would be a different story for the Dallas Cowboys this year. And their schedule has been much easier. And I think Nick Sirianni has had to coach his ass off. And I think with the Eagles, sure, you did get exposed by the 49ers, but you at least played them tougher than the Dallas Cowboys did.
Oh, yeah. And also, looking at the Cowboys' record, they faced the bottom 5 Brickyard teams, as we know, most confidential, most accurate, most trustworthy sites on the website here. And they've played 8 games. They faced the Cardinals, they faced the Panthers, the Patriots, all these teams here. And of those teams, they're 7-1. So 7 of their 9 wins have been against bottom 5 teams, according to the Brickyard. I say to myself, like, okay, you've beat them up and you've destroyed them. You have a wide point differential margin, and I'm not going to take away from that because their defense has been very impressive.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the 2 wins that are outside of them are the Rams, who I feel like they're a decent team to game plan for. I mean, with Cooper Kupp banged up and Puka Nacua, like, you kind of know what to get. You kind of know what to expect from the Rams. And then the Seahawks, like, Geno Smith has not been the same guy as he was last year. Another team where you take out DK and then the rest of the guys are good, not great. So, like, give them credit for being 9-3 and having a good season. But at the same time, 7 of their 9 wins are against bottom 5 teams.
Yeah, so you look at that and you just have to look at the competition they're playing. It's like, yeah, sure, week in and week out, like, the Cowboys look more dominant than the Philadelphia Eagles, but the Philadelphia Eagles are getting everyone's best shot every single week, and they're playing the toughest teams in the league at this point, whether it's on the road or at home.
Yeah, so I think that you look at those 2 teams, like, you know, the Eagles are now 10-2. And they've taken on the Chiefs, the Bills, the 49ers, the Cowboys, the Jets even. I know the Jets are out of the mix and they look bad now, but that defense is no joke either. So they've taken on some of these juggernauts, and they still prevail as the number 1 seed currently. I think credit to them.
Yeah, and they took on the Dallas Cowboys, and the Philadelphia Eagles took on the Jets at 2 very different points of the season, where this was Zach Wilson's first game actually starting. He wasn't expecting to play at all this season because Aaron Rodgers was supposed to be there. He was supposed to sit back and learn behind him, and they played them in Dallas, where the Philadelphia Eagles, on the other hand, played them in New York, where at that time they had just given the Chiefs hell. They had just beat the Bills up pretty badly, and they had been beating up some of the best quarterbacks in the league at home, and that's kind of where the Jets were peaking in the middle of the season. They kind of played the Jets when they were at their best this year, whereas the Cowboys, they got them in Zach Wilson's first start there, still had Trayvon Diggs there as well.
Yeah, so I think that completely different matchups there. But Cowboys win. They're right in the mix for that 1 seed if they were to beat the Eagles. So credit to them. And then the Seahawks. Do you think the Seahawks can still make the playoffs from here?
Yeah, I think you still can make the playoffs, but it's going to be tough here. You're 6-6, and now you're locked into a 4-team race right now. And then it's just looking at Geno Smith right now. Is he really the guy there who's going to be able to go and make a play when it matters? Because he's been in dogfights with teams at home like the Commanders all year long. You got absolutely annihilated by the 49ers, who your division rival at home this year, and you play the 49ers again this week after they're flying high. And it looks like at this point, no one is really up to the task of slowing down or stopping the 49ers, especially when Deebo Samuel, Trent Williams, and George Kittle are playing as well as they can. And I feel like the engine for that team, really why they suffered in the 3 games that they lost, was because of Deebo Samuel, because he's the one who's out there talking smack. He's the one who's out there getting his team up ready to go. And he was the one who said if Brock Purdy played in that game, it would have been a very different story with the Philadelphia Eagles. And then we saw him go out there and get 3 touchdowns this week.
Yeah, and he was out of his mind in this game. And he's just one of those guys that can really break the game open as well. And he's that missing piece because we love Brandon Ayuk and we love some of the other receivers on that team. George Kittle, obviously, great run blocker, and then also obviously a great vertical threat as well. But when you add Deebo Samuel to the mix with all the motion plays that they run with Christian McCaffrey as well, he just breaks the game open, and it's hard to scheme for a team like them because they can beat you in so many different ways.
Yeah, I mean, even Jawan Jennings is ripping off 20-yard runs. And for the San Francisco 49ers, it's not like the big plays downfield. It's, oh, George Kittle, here's a check down, take that 20 yards. Deebo Samuel, here's a check down, take that 20 yards. Oh, Brandon Ayuk, here's a check down, take that 20 yards. Christian McCaffrey, here's a check down, take that 20 yards. And then you're going up against someone like Brock Purdy, who isn't the strongest guy in the world, and his build is definitely going to be what people knock him for the most. However, what everyone says about him, what Greg Olsen said about him watching that game and meeting with him, said Sam Darnold walked up to him when they were shooting the shit back and forth for this game, and he was like, unsolicited, he was like, Brock Purdy is the smartest quarterback I've ever played with in high school, college, or professional, and he processes information faster than any other quarterback I've ever played with before. And that was just unsolicited. He was telling that to Greg Olsen.
Yeah, and I think Brock Purdy, I kind of shut down his MVP race earlier in this game, in this episode, and I think he definitely deserves to be in the mix for it. Sure, he's got some great numbers, and I think a lot of people point to his weapons as something that kind of hinders his MVP race, but he's leading the league in passing QBR. He's had a perfect QBR, which only 2 other players have had. He's led the league in QBR 5 of the 13 weeks. So he's got a lot of stats that benefit him. If we're talking about it being a stats race, then Brock Purdy definitely fits in that conversation.
Yeah, it's kind of like the NBA with Jokic. It's just his next-gen stats and efficiency is so off the charts that's kind of the reason why you'd get to him. So have the Cowboys there. I think Seattle, their schedule is kind of going to hurt them down the stretch here, and we'll get to that when we preview the playoff race. But I think when you're comparing them to a team like the Packers, who gets to play some of the easiest teams in the league coming up here, I believe all of their next games, they're playing some of the easiest teams in the league coming up here down the home stretch. Yeah. So I think the Packers would have the benefit of the doubt over them. And then let's see what the Vikings are like without Justin Jefferson there. So it's going to be a lot tougher for the Seattle Seahawks after losing this game in Dallas, which I feel like is a game they let slip behind, whether it's the refs. I'm not going to blame them because you do have to put yourself in a position to succeed, and you can't let CeeDee Lamb run all over you like he did in this game when he's the only player you need to focus on stopping for the Dallas Cowboys, along with Tony Pollard actually looking like he got a little bit of his burst back in this game as well. So Seattle was a team, they're one of the youngest defenses in the league, and this is where you're supposed to make that jump if you're a young team, and it seems like they're still a little bit too inconsistent to really fully wrap your arms around, especially when you're letting Micah Parsons on the most important play of the game run unimpeded to the quarterback when he's the number 1 guy. You need to know where he is for the Dallas Cowboys. So if you're making errors like that, it's just a tough team to wrap my arms around at this point, especially with how inconsistent their offense can be at times, not looking for DK Metcalf on those last 2 drives.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that maybe next year is their year that they really make that push above. I would go out and try to get a veteran star if you can. if they're available, if they have the cap space for it. I think that they're definitely poised great for the future, but Geno Smith, consider whether or not you want to draft a quarterback this year. On the other side of the ball, try and pursue maybe Chase Young, in free agency, you go after and try to get someone like Chase Young. You have talent there, but they need some more reps. They need some more experience. And then eventually I think they'll be in the mix.
Yeah, eventually they'll be in the mix. And a team we thought could maybe get better towards the end of the season and get into that mix was the Washington Commanders. And a team that's like, okay, well, Sam Howell 1 week, he kind of had the Baker Mayfield clock where every other week he was playing elite. And then when it was, I believe it was like a even week, he was terrible. An odd week, he was really good. And then that just changed as the season went on to just being horrible because Sam Howell had one of the dumbest plays I've ever seen in the NFL. Not only this year, but maybe just ever, where he just turns and he's like, yes, I'm going to throw the screen straight to Van Ginkel and he's going to run it in for a touchdown. And I just looked, I'm like, did you not look at all? He just turned, let the ball go, threw it straight to Van Ginkel of all people on the Miami Dolphins. I was like, let's see how Miami does in a tough torrential environment. Well, Tyreek Hill, still the fastest receiver in the league, still the best receiver in the league to this point, and he just ran all over them. Sam Howell looked completely outmatched, and Miami's defense finally looked good. I get they're playing another bad team, but they put up 45 points on the road in a tough environment. And then Sam Howell, he was at a point in the Seattle game where like, okay, maybe there's something there. Maybe there's some potential, but it seems like the whole vibe of the Commanders was killed as soon as they traded Montez Sweat. As soon as Chase Young was gone, it seemed like that team kind of just lost any fire or desire to push through and make the playoffs. And they kind of got the vibe in the locker room that they were kind of tanking, especially seeing Chase Young go to the San Francisco 49ers. And Chase Young is like, wow, it's wonderful here compared to being in the Washington Commanders. So there's still a little bit of air of dysfunction that they have to get out of the room with those XFL uniforms that they're wearing still.
Yeah, and the last 2 weeks have been outscored 90-30. So negative 60-point differential. I mean, they got annihilated by the Cowboys, and then they got annihilated by the Dolphins in this game. You look at this team and like they had a good story coming in. Like I liked what Sam Howell was doing, and I think maybe you give them another year. Not so sure yet, depending on where their draft pick falls, because they are falling in that draft order. Maybe they go after someone like a Michael Penix, Jaden Daniels, whoever it might be. But for them, like I think you nailed it with like the trade deadline. As soon as you traded away those guys, they knew we're not competing for the wild card at this point. So it just feels like their team is deflated at this point. It seems like the next stretch of games, you're really going to start to see the worst of the Commanders. And it's a shame because I do like some of their players on offense. Terry McLaurin, not a single catch in this game. Completely just shut out from this game. Ran some cardio, according to Terry McLaurin. So,
yeah.
So, like, moving forward for them, like, this is kind of the last stretch where they figure out whether Sam Howell is the guy moving forward, at least into next year, or whether or not they go after and get one of these quarterbacks that are in this draft.
Yeah, I think if you have an opportunity to go out there and get a quarterback, you definitely draft one. And then Sam Howell's a guy you can kind of justify them sitting behind a few weeks. And then if Sam Howell continues to flounder, you give him some competition. Let's see how Sam Howell responds to that, because as of right now, he doesn't really have a backup quarterback that's going to make him uncomfortable for that starting job because he is the best quarterback. It's not like a Mac Jones situation where it's like flip a quarter between him and Bailey Zappi, depending on the week. One of them, they're probably going to be the same quarterback, whereas Sam Howell, if you're going to continue to tank, you might as well go out there, try and get one of these second or third round quarterbacks that can really make an impact for your franchise. But it's not the only problem that the Washington Commanders have. Still have an issue with that offensive line. Still have an issue now. You trade away your two pass rushers on defense, so you have to rebuild an entire defense. Eric Bieniemy is getting some interest for head coaching jobs from the Bears, and I'm pretty sure the Panthers would probably be interested in him as well, especially to pair with a young quarterback like Bryce Young there. And I'm sure he wants an actual head coaching opportunity, maybe wants to get out of that Commander situation. And I wouldn't blame the Commanders if they're like, you know what, we're getting rid of Ron Rivera, but we do need to get rid of everyone on that coaching staff just to make a complete culture change in the situation to kind of just change the whole momentum of the franchise. And I think it starts with rebuilding FedEx Field.
Yeah, or just building a whole new stadium as a whole, renaming your team, changing your uniforms, getting rid of all the head coaches, maybe trading away some of the other guys on that team. I know Kendall Fuller's still on there. Maybe Terry McLaurin wants to leave and pair up with one of these superstar quarterbacks who need a wide receiver.
Chiefs.
The Chiefs could be a fit for him. Hell, even the Packers, if they're going to continue to rock with Jordan Love, who looked great on Sunday Night Football, maybe they pair him there. The situation he's in now, he's had a bunch of mid/terrible quarterbacks. I think maybe he makes that leap and tries to get paired with one of these guys like Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, whoever it might be. Just get him somewhere where he can thrive, because I think he's a great receiver. I think he has a bit of a DJ Moore situation where he's played with a lot of below average quarterbacks. You pair him with somebody like these top 10 quarterbacks, and I think he could really strive.
And for Miami, did they show you anything new in this game? Or you're like, okay, that's nice. You blow out a team you should have blown out?
No, I mean, I like what they played on defense, but at the same time, like, this is kind of what I expect from the Dolphins. I want to see them do that against a winning team personally. But, what they proved to me in this game is that Tyreek Hill is the MVP at this point.
Yeah, and so Tyreek Hill has been asked before, like, hey, do you want to win the MVP this year? Do you think it's time for a non-quarterback? And then Tyreek Hill has responded with, no, we already have an MVP on our team, and his name is Tua Tagovailoa.
Yeah.
Tua. His name is Tua.
Yeah, his name is Tua. No, I mean, I think without Tyreek Hill, that offense is not the same. Even with Jalen Waddle, we love Jalen Waddle in this team, but Tyreek Hill just opens up the game like not many wide receivers have done, not even just in the league, but all time. He's entering into all-time territory. And I think, when his career is over, I think it'd be great to break down like where he ranks, because I think he's up there with some of the greats.
Yeah, I think just with his athleticism, he has a Steph Curry impact where Steph Curry, as soon as he walks across half court, you have to think about picking him up here. And we thought Mahomes was that effect on the Kansas City Chiefs, where in reality, he opened it up for Patrick Mahomes, where just kind of their offense was a motion offense, where as soon as Patrick Mahomes would roll out, Kelsey and Tyreek Hill had that symbiotic relationship. And it's rare where you have two guys on a team that have that relationship with the quarterback. And I think with Tyreek Hill is you have to think about 40 yards that way, but also when you're thinking about 40 yards that way, he can outrun you for a simple slant route. And in this game, he had 157 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns, and was averaging 31 yards a reception.
Yeah, and that's just a level of dominance that we just have not seen to this point.
Yeah, so I think with the Dolphins, they have a tough stretch to finish the year where they play 3 good teams. I believe the Bills and the Cowboys are a part of that. So that's when we'll see a real test there. And if they want the 1 seed, they'll be able to push forward, win some of those games, especially with Trevor Lawrence getting banged up on Monday Night Football. But good strides for the Dolphins. Commanders, it's time to overhaul, figure out what you're doing with that franchise and Sam Howell, and please rebuild and rebrand FedEx Field and the uniforms and the team name there. We had another game this week. It was one of the most important games for the AFC wildcard run. We had the Denver Broncos going to Houston. The Denver Broncos were the hottest team in the league at that point. They were on a 5-game winning streak after starting out 3-5. And then Sean Payton figured out the offense, figured out how to make Russell Wilson not look terrible. Then they go to Houston, though. And then Houston, also one of the hottest teams in the league, also a team vying for a playoff spot, sitting on the outside looking in, who's already lost to the Indianapolis Colts. And that game will probably decide who gets either the last wildcard spot or slides into the 6th seed there. And then we saw Denver go to Houston, but Houston was able to muster up a win and outgain them in one of the most important games probably down the stretch here for the AFC wildcard race.
Yeah, and I think the big takeaway that I got from this game is when you force the Broncos to have to throw themselves back into a game where they fall behind and they have to catch up, Russell Wilson just isn't that same guy that he used to be, where he threw 3 interceptions. One, it came down to the last play, and it was a great play by their corner, Jimmy Ward, former 49er. But when they fall behind and they need to play at a deficit, this is a team that I just don't trust to come back in those games. And Russell Wilson, there was a couple of interceptions, a couple of bad throws that ultimately cost them the game. But for me, the takeaway in this game is the Texans. We've been on the bandwagon all this time, and Will Anderson just absolutely everywhere in this game. I think he had, 3 sacks in this game?
Yeah.
He was everywhere, just giving them problems everywhere. So, I mean, this Texans team is tough. They're a tough out for any team, and I give them a lot of credit for going up against the hottest team and honestly, giving Russell Wilson horrors throughout the entire game.
Yeah, they gave Russell Wilson horrors throughout the entire game, and then he inevitably threw the interception there. But my takeaway was the Houston Texans' just ability to keep pushing through adversity. You lose a tough game at home versus the Jacksonville Jaguars last week, and then you go out there versus the hottest team in the league at home, and then you put a stop to that. And this was a real staple of figuring out who's a legit team that can actually go out there and potentially steal a game in the AFC playoffs and who's going to eventually fall back in that playoff race here. And then CJ Stroud continues to just let it fly, push the ball down the field, and you could see the difference between CJ Stroud and Russell Wilson in this game, where Russell Wilson, every time he tried to push the ball down the field, it either didn't go his way or it ended up being a turnover, a la the last drive in that game where he ended up throwing the interception to Jimmy Ward, 49ers transplant that D'Amico Ryans brought with him to Houston in that game. And then CJ Stroud was inevitably in a dogfight, a close game, a must-win game, playoff environment, two teams fighting for their lives, was able to make enough plays to keep his team in the race for his division now with Trevor Lawrence going down, put themselves in a position to go to Indianapolis and have a chance to compete with them and knock them out of the playoff race.
Yeah, a lot of credits to CJ Stroud here. And it'll be interesting to see how they are moving forward. I believe they have a pretty easy schedule moving forward, if I'm not mistaken. We're definitely going to go over that when we talk about the playoff preview.
Yeah, but sadly, in this game, well, they did go out there, beat Denver, slow down their playoff hopes. It seemed like Denver was due for a loss at this point. However, on that push play to get the touchdown, Tank Dell ends up going down here. Not sure why you would put a receiver who's only 165 pounds. Like, he's lighter than me. I'm sitting probably a solid 30 pounds heavier than Tank Dell, and he's taller than me here. Ends up going down. I believe it was Achilles.
Torn
fibula in this game, and
he's
out for the season. Do you think that hurts any of Houston's chances here, or do you think CJ Stroud will be able to still do the same things he's doing at this point?
Well, I think he's still going to be able to do what he can, but at the same time, like, losing Tank Dell, he's been their number one to this point, and I think his chemistry with CJ Stroud is definitely going to be missed. I see their offense taking a slight step back. I still trust CJ Stroud, and I especially trust that defense with how well they've been playing down the stretch. Derek Stingley was a guy that they were framing as a bust after he was drafted ahead of Sauce Gardner, and he stepped up and made a great play, had an interception in this game, and he's been playing pretty well for them. I think that moving forward, I think that same recipe that they've been having lately, where being in a dogfight and their defense making plays when it matters, is what's going to get them into the playoff spot. It's going to lean on Will Anderson, and then on the other side of the ball, Nico Collins, and if Devin Singletary can continue to play as well as he's had, and Dameon Pierce, who in this game I think had some good runs in this game.
Yeah.
Looks like he's gotten his legs under him again. Then I think they still have definitely a spot to make it into the wild card. I think inevitably they will, but this is a big loss for them.
Yeah, and I think with this Houston team, what I saw from that defense is they are really just one really good draft away from that defense just being very, very, very good to one of the best defenses in the NFL. You mentioned Derek Stingley Jr., but you have Jimmy Ward in this game who ended up making the key interception to end the game versus Russell Wilson. And then you also have Will Anderson, who turned out to be one of the best draft picks for them because they ended up trading their first round pick to the Arizona Cardinals to pick him up, and CJ Stroud. And now they got two of the best players in that draft in the top three picks. And a lot of people are kind of looking at it funny, like, what are you doing here? But it's like, hey, if we're just going to draft a top pass rusher anyways, we might as well trade our first round pick to the Arizona Cardinals because we're planning on being really good this year. So it kind of reminds me a lot of what the Philadelphia Eagles were their first year under Nick Sirianni, where start out a little bit rough here and then they have to grow their roots, make sure they have that solid foundation that Sirianni was talking about. And then next year, I think Houston's going to make that massive jump. But it is really weird, though, because we thought the AFC South, most people thought the AFC South was going to be one of the worst divisions in the league. And now we're kind of seeing how the AFC North is banged up and injured. And now we have the potential for three AFC South teams to legitimately be in the playoffs this year.
Yeah, and we had that AFC South battle with the Colts and the Titans this week. And it was one of the best games of the week. The Colts, they got into a shootout with the Titans where you saw Gardner Minshew make some clutch plays, ultimately winning the game for them in overtime. Gardner Minshew playing out of his mind. And then you also saw players like Michael Pittman making plays when it mattered. So the Colts, they're still in the mix here. They're, I think, currently the 7th seed, if I'm not mistaken, and playing some great football. And I give credit to the Titans, where Will Levis, in my opinion, is not the guy. He showed me, I think we've seen enough tape from him where I don't think that they should rely on him next year, maybe go for a quarterback in the draft. But they played a great game. Mike Vrabel had a great coaching performance, but Shane Steichen, this is a guy that's in the coach of the year conversation. If you were to tell me beginning of the season that they were going to be 6-6, I'd be like, damn, Anthony Richardson's a hell of a quarterback. But he goes down week 3, gets banged up. They move forward with their backup quarterback, Minshew Mania. He's gone in there. He's played really great football. His awareness sometimes does question me sometimes, but overall, I mean, also losing Jonathan Taylor for a period of time. He's been banged up as well. You're filling in with Zach Moss, who, if you would have told me this season he was going to have a career year, I wouldn't believe it. And now he's been playing great football. Michael Pittman's elevated his game. Gardner Minshew's playing out of his mind. The Colts, this is a hell of a team.
Yeah, the Colts are a hell of a team, and wow, what a difference a coach makes. I looked at the Indianapolis Colts last year and their coaching, and I was like, their coaching sucks. I watched them play, and I was like, wow, what a horrible coach they have. And it was just, to me, always felt like a team that had the talent there, but always underachieved. Wasn't really sure if Michael Pittman was a 1 or a 2 yet. And now that they add Josh Downs, and that as a rookie wide receiver, he's been playing very well for them this year. We're seeing Alec Pierce take a step forward this season. We're seeing Michael Pittman have the best year he's ever had before. And then Gardner Minshew is a player who, he was with the Jacksonville Jaguars, had one of the best interception to touchdown ratios in the league. And then also with the Jacksonville Jaguars, who, can you name a wide receiver on that team? Like, that was after the aftermath of Blake Bortles. They draft this guy. Gardner Minshew gives the Jacksonville Jaguars franchise life. Everyone is wearing mustaches. They're saying this guy is an icon. Then he goes to the Philadelphia Eagles as a backup quarterback. Shane Steichen brings him with him to the Indianapolis Colts. And then Gardner Minshew, he just steps in there and then has been winning them close games. And it's not like, oh, yeah, they're scheming around him, and there's definitely a great scheme on offense, but he's letting it rip too, where it was 4th and goal in overtime, and then he rips it for the touchdown. And it's not only that, when you have a quarterback throughout the season, it's long, it's grueling. Being an NFL athlete is one of the toughest jobs in the world here, especially for a team like the Indianapolis Colts, where you're fighting every single week for every yard and every play there. Gardner Minshew makes it fun. Like, just him in the locker room dancing. Yeah. It seemed like he was getting that team hyped after the game. He's a guy where your players can rally around him and believe in him. Not the tallest guy in the world, not the smartest guy in the world, but he just goes out there, gets it done, and he makes winning plays, and he's not afraid to let it rip when it matters most. And for him, it's just the awareness in the pocket, where sometimes he gets a little bit of tunnel vision down the field. He has those fumble issues, but for me, I look at a game like Houston and Denver, it's like, well, who's been playing better this year? Has it been Gardner Minshew or Russell Wilson? And for me, I would rather have Russell Wilson at this point, or Gardner Minshew at this point. And then he's been able to elevate the Colts to a point where they have a chance to get it done in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think that they could pair up with a team like the Dolphins, or they could pair up with really any of these teams. I think a lot of them are vulnerable at this point, especially if the Jags end up winning the division without Trevor Lawrence at the helm. I think they can definitely go in there and win a playoff game. And I think, again, this goes shout out to Shane Steichen, because he saw Gardner Minshew. He saw the talent there. He brings him in. And it's unfortunate to see what happened with the Jonathan Taylor situation and what happened with Anthony Richardson going down. But bringing him in there, having the culture form as quickly as it has, I don't think he gets enough credit for it, because Gardner Minshew, he's one of those guys that I don't think the league really takes very seriously. He's a backup. He's somebody that you don't really love to have as your starter long term. But at the end of the day, when he fills in for situations like this and he's played as well as he has, I give credit to Shane Steichen for seeing that talent in Philadelphia and bringing him over, having that solid backup for Anthony Richardson, someone that could give him pressure. I know beginning of the season we said that Gardner Minshew should start and then bring Anthony Richardson in later. I think he's a guy that, if he doesn't find a starting job elsewhere, coming back to Indianapolis and having that culture builder within the locker room, with Anthony Richardson being essentially a rookie again next year with the limited amount of times he got to play this year, I think a lot of credit to Shane Steichen here.
Yeah, I think he definitely fits the vibe there, especially because the Indianapolis Colts are a complete team where you see defensively they can step up, make a stop when it matters. And when the Cleveland Browns were at the peak of their powers, that was one of probably still the best game of the season when they faced off. I mean, 39-38, Myles Garrett was having probably the best game any defensive player has had all season, especially with that blocked field goal that he had. And then you look at him, and then they get basically 2 touchdowns from their special teams in this game versus the Tennessee Titans. So I definitely think they are a legit team, especially with how bad the Steelers looked versus the Arizona Cardinals and Kenny Pickett going down. So it's a team I definitely have a lot of stock in, especially you take someone like Zach Moss, who everyone thought was terrible in Buffalo. What a difference coaching makes when you can actually coach a really good run game in Indianapolis. I want to talk about one thing, though, for the Tennessee Titans, though. It was that blow up between Will Levis and DeAndre Hopkins. Do you think that's a situation that benefits your team when you have a young quarterback who goes off at a wide receiver like DeAndre Hopkins? Or do you think, like, you haven't really accomplished anything? You've looked pretty bad the past 2 weeks. Who are you to go at someone like DeAndre Hopkins? It did seem like kind of frustration, him letting it out. I'm glad he showed the emotion there, but maybe it's not the best time for it.
I don't think it's a good time to do it with somebody like DeAndre Hopkins, who's an all-time great wide receiver. I don't think you should be telling DeAndre Hopkins what he should be doing. DeAndre Hopkins should be telling him what he's doing. This is like, what, start number 5 for him at this point? Outside of that game with the Falcons, I think he has 2 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. He has not been playing his best football. I give him credit for feeding D-Hop as best as he can, but I mean, there's 2 ways you can take this. You can say, like, okay, well, the blow up, it was good. I think they ended up getting a touchdown shortly after, so that's a benefit there. But I guess it really depends on how it translates into next game. I think it's good to see Will Levis have that fire in him, but at the same time, don't be going at your number 1 wide receiver, a guy who has been proven in this league.
Yeah, and do you think for this game, it was a game where Indianapolis's defense wasn't really there. They had to rely on their special teams, and they weren't really able to run the ball in this game, and they had to rely on Gardner Minshew a lot. Do you think it proved like, hey, even if our defense isn't there, even if our run game isn't there, we can still rely on our passing game? Does that prove to you that they are more of a complete team than most people think?
Yeah, because I mean, their defense in this game, they lost a lot of opportunities, but when it comes down to what really has been their bread and butter the last several years has been leaning on Jonathan Taylor. And Jonathan Taylor obviously didn't play in this game, but Zach Moss, he was shut down by that Titans pass rush as well. Being able to get it to his guys like a Michael Pittman, like a Jaden, Josh Downs, like a Alec Pierce, who's been a really solid 3 for them. I think it shows that they're a team that can win in a lot of different ways. And we saw the Browns game. We saw how they won that game. We saw this game winning in a lot of different ways. I think that shows a team that's a more complete team that has a lot more tricks up their sleeves than some of these other teams. Like, I hate to say it, the Dolphins, who are more of a front-runner team that can win against bad teams, but when somebody shuts down one of their star guys, doesn't have another wheel there.
Yeah, I would be really interested to see, and I'm kind of rooting for Indianapolis versus Miami first round playoff matchup, just to see the chess match between Shane Steichen and Mike McDaniel, and all the firepower that both teams have. I think would be something to see there. Let's stick with the bad games here. So we have the Atlanta Falcons going to New York, taking on the Jets. And really, this was one of the worst games in the league, but I believe Tim Boyle goes down. Trevor Siemian has to come in. And so now the New York Jets are at the point where they're like, hey, Zach, would you mind starting next game? And he was like,
I got it.
Yeah.
I'm coming in. Put me in, coach.
Put me in. And then Zach Wilson's like, well, I mean, I thought Tim Boyle was better than me and Trevor Siemian, and you guys benched me. So how about, no, I don't want to start next week.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's in a position to say that with how bad he's played the last 4 years to this point. It's funny. It shows just how bad the Jets are and what a mess they are, because I know that they had the fix with Aaron Rodgers, and I know he went down, unprecedented, right? Zach Wilson fills in, and he had flashes at certain points, but for the most part, did not play good football. They bench him for a guy who threw 2 touchdowns in college, not 1, 2 touchdowns in college. A guy who it's still an enigma to me that he has a job in the NFL when you have other guys who, even though they might not be at the same caliber they once were, I see someone like RG3, Cam Newton, sees these other guys who I'm like, just give them a chance. At least they're a mentor. But no, we have Tim Boyle, who has 2 touchdowns and 10 interceptions for his career. Don't know what was going on there. They start him. He's worse than Zach Wilson. And then they bring in Trevor Siemian, who I think at one point, maybe I'm wrong, was in the XFL at certain points, or at
I
least
think so.
or at least at one point he will be in the future. And now they're going back to Zach Wilson. I think this is something where if they were to fire Robert Saleh, it's going to be for situations like this with the quarterback situation, where it's almost reminiscent of the Patriots this season, where they just are playing musical chairs with their quarterbacks. They have a really bad quarterback room at this point, and now they're going back to Zach Wilson. And I mean, I see why he's maybe hesitant, but at the same time, he's probably going to go down as one of the worst busts of all time.
Yeah, I mean, and then we can have that conversation too, because for me, I think it's funny that Zach Wilson doesn't want to play for the New York Jets, where you put yourself in the situation where you trade for a brittle, underachieving quarterback in the playoffs, not the regular season. I know he won back-to-back MVPs here, but you trade for Aaron Rodgers as your temporary fix, which is something that has been the problem for your entire franchise, where you're like, okay, Mark Sanchez, Geno Smith, Sam Darnold, and then they just keep taking the wrong guy. And then also for the New York Jets, they're like, Zach Wilson's like, well, who am I going out there with? Because besides Breece Hall and Zach Wilson, we really don't have anyone on offense. And the knock for the New York Jets here with Aaron Rodgers was the offensive line wasn't going to be good enough for them to be able to compete with the Buffalo Bills, even though I thought they could, because they split with the Buffalo Bills the past few years, even when they were horrible. I was like, okay, I still think they can compete with them offensive line, but now you have a offensive line issue. You have an issue where Garrett Wilson is the only wide receiver there. So if I'm Zach Wilson, I was like, why am I going to hurt my stock that is already pretty low by going out there and playing terrible, because I have no one to throw the ball to? And we saw that with Tim Boyle. We saw that with Trevor Siemian coming into the game. So let's look at the biggest draft bust of all time and see if it really is Zach Wilson or maybe it's someone else here. So I'm going to go, would you rather quarterbacks here for Zach Wilson or all of these busts that I have here? So the first one would be, would you rather have Zach Wilson or Ryan Leaf?
I have to go. I'm going to be nice and say Zach Wilson here. I think Ryan Leaf, he he had attitude issues. He had, I don't want to make fun of his personal issues, but he had personal issues as well. And he was just a cancer in the locker room. I don't think Zach Wilson had that same issue. I see flashes there. I would take Zach Wilson.
Okay. And then after that, we have probably the biggest bust of all time. When I think of NFL bust, I'm like, wow, what a bust this guy is. Jamarcus Russell.
Yeah, I mean, at least Zach Wilson watches his tape, and he wasn't called Jabba the Hutt by Stephen A. Smith. So
Jabba the Hutt.
I'll take Zach Wilson.
Yeah, they gave this guy blank videotapes, and then they're like, oh, did you watch the film? He was like, yeah, it was great. Great film. And then after that, we have Matt Leinart.
Matt Leinart. I think I would take Matt Leinart in this situation. That Cardinal situation that he was in was pretty abysmal. I think his number one receiver was, he had Larry Fitzgerald, but outside of that, like, his second option was Rashard Mendenhall.
Yeah.
Not beautiful. I would take Matt Leinart there.
Okay. And then after that, we have, let's go David Carr.
David Carr. I would take David Carr here because he has the record for most sacks in a season. He got sacked 77 times for that Houston team, and that was before they had some of those elite receivers. I would take David Carr. I think his career would have been spared elsewhere. Okay.
And then we have the cocaine crusader coming out of college here, Johnny Manziel.
Johnny Manziel. Yeah, I'll take Zach Wilson there. Johnny Manziel, he had another issue where he wasn't really watching his film. He had a very interesting party life. He would have been a good person to have a reality TV show for. I'll take Zach Wilson here.
Zach Wilson, yeah. Johnny Manziel seems like a guy who just should have gone straight out of college to hanging out with the Nelk boys. Like
Yeah.
maybe if Nelk was a thing when he came out of college, I believe they've interviewed Johnny Manziel. He seems like he fits the realm of someone who's like a Bob Menery or Steiny, and could probably be a more interesting co-host than someone like Steiny on that podcast. Why is he still there? Nelk, fire him. And then we have Blaine Gabbert.
Wow, Blaine Gabbert was pretty bad. Damn. I think I would take Blaine Gabbert though over Zach Wilson currently. I don't know. I don't see. I think they're both pretty bad, but I would take Blaine Gabbert.
Okay. And then a guy that no one knows why he was drafted.
Oh, I know where this is going.
Josh Whedon.
Dude. Okay. Well, the thing is I have to put Brandon Whedon above him because he should have never been drafted. He was 28 years old. I think he was older than Aaron Rodgers at the time. Like, he was older than a majority of these quarterbacks. And, like, that was more on the Browns. The Browns should have never taken him to begin with. Or if they were going to take him in, like, the 7th round. But that dude was a fossil entering the league. He had no hope.
Yeah, so we've decided Zach Wilson, not the biggest bust of all time.
Not the biggest bust of all time, but
he's one of them.
He's in the top 10.
Yeah, but it's like you look at the draft he was in, it's Trevor, Justin Fields. Maybe he gets to another situation. He sits down with someone that's like, okay, this is how you take in information. This is how you process it. Maybe he can get Neuralink installed to help him process.
Smoke comes out of his ears.
Yeah, smoke starts coming out of his ears. So that's really his problem. And then it's like Mac Jones, Sam Darnold. Do you think Zach... The real question is who you would rather have of Zach Wilson, Sam Darnold, or Josh Rosen?
I would take Sam Darnold of those three. And that's just picking at straws at that point.
Yeah, so we have that game. Complete bust.
One of the worst games of the year. I really thought watching this game that at one point it was going to be 2-0 Jets winning that game. And I was praying for it. I'm like, let's have the lowest scoring game of all time. I'll take it.
And then after that, we had the Pittsburgh Steelers at home versus the Arizona Cardinals. This is a game where I looked at the Houston Texans game versus the Carolina Panthers. I'm like, if they miss the playoffs, I can point to this game and say, this is why you can't lose to a team who has only won one game, and that's their only win, is coming against you in Carolina, who fired their coach faster than any other coach besides the guy from San Francisco.
The guy that traded for OJ.
The guy who traded for OJ couldn't last longer than Urban Meyer. So for this game, for the Steelers, I was like, this is something where you have to go out there, beat the Arizona Cardinals at home, even with Mitch Trubisky, and win. And then you have a lightning delay in December in Pittsburgh, which is just crazy to me. And then Kenny Pickett goes down this game. His ankle is hurt. And for me, the Steelers are a bizarre team because Mike Tomlin teams always have these wins against teams they shouldn't beat. And he has the reputation of his teams playing down to their competition, which I think is something we have seen, even though he has them ready to go for those big primetime matchups, other than the New England Patriots when they are in their heyday. But for me, I was like, how do the Pittsburgh Steelers with Kenny Pickett, who I don't think anyone thinks he's a great quarterback. I don't think most people think he's a good quarterback. How are you that much worse with Mitch Trubisky than Kenny Pickett? Like, it's mind blowing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it speaks to Mitch Trubisky at this point. He has not shown to be a guy who can push the needle by any means. But at the same time, you're the Pittsburgh Steelers. You have George Pickens. You have Deontay Johnson. You have Pat Freiermuth. And you've seen Jalen Warren and Najee Harris break through these last couple of weeks. And you lost to the Cardinals, who have been weekly recipients on the worst top 5 list. We already know the drill, most accurate, most trustworthy list in the NFL. And the Cardinals smacked you around in this game. And I know Kenny Pickett went down, and that might have messed with your offense, but they torched you. James Conner had a career day against this man. So this is a game, like you mentioned, you point to it and you're like, okay, well, the Steelers missed the playoffs. It's going to be because they lost to the Cardinals. And this is probably going to be the Cardinals' last win of the season. They're now 3-10, and the rest of the seasons are going to be a mop-up from there. But Cardinals, give credit to them. Kyler Murray had a good game. James Conner had a good game, and their defense played well. So credit to Jonathan Gannon.
Yeah, and then TJ Watt goes down, ends up coming back into this game here, but Steelers injuries are starting to pile up there. Kenny Pickett's probably going to miss a few games here. So are you at the point now where you're like, Steelers definitely aren't going to make the playoffs, or do you still think they're in that mix here?
It's weird. If Mitch Trubisky is going to be walking into the playoffs with them, I'm begging that they don't make the playoffs because I'm sorry. I don't want to see Mitch Trubisky versus Tua Tagovailoa. I don't want to see Mitch Trubisky versus Patrick Mahomes versus Josh Allen, whoever it might be. I don't want to see Mitch Trubisky in the playoffs ever again. It's bad enough that we had the Cody Parkey game. I don't want to see him in the playoffs, period.
Okay. Yeah. For me, I was like, Steelers, if you get Kenny Pickett back, maybe, but you do have some tough games coming up here. I think with TJ Watt going down in that game, it's like it was kind of just one of those games where it all came together where you're going to win, because the Steelers are a team that kind of just beats you into submission where you're just getting hit by TJ Watt. You're getting Joey Porter Jr. covering your guys, and then you're getting hit by Highsmith. So it seems like by the time you get to the fourth quarter, that's when teams start to gas out, and that's when the Pittsburgh Steelers start to pick up their play here. So I don't see them like coming back, which is my issue. It seems like their offense is very similar to Denver at this point, where Kenny Pickett can bring you back, but once you start to fall down by 1 or 2 scores, I start to doubt their ability to be able to overcome a deficit.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, Kenny Pickett, he's really only good in the fourth quarter. And then those other 3 quarters, it's kind of a wild card situation. With him being gone, I think he's going to be gone for a couple of weeks. They have a pretty tough schedule ahead. The real question is, can they maintain that winning record that Mike Tomlin's had for this last 15 years?
Yeah, I think they can at this point, because what are they at here?
They're 7-5.
7-5 here. Yeah, I definitely think they can win 2 more games there to maintain the winning record. Seems like something he's always been able to do, especially when one of your games is versus the New England Patriots. But I could also see that being one of these weird games where the Patriots always beat the Steelers. And I know they've been horrific, but it's just one of those games where I know the Steelers should win that game, but I just have this weird feeling in the pit of my stomach that the Patriots could pull it out.
Well, they need to win that game if they're going to stay in the mix, because the Patriots, you'll see them in the bottom 5 teams, and they have some historically horrible offensive numbers.
And then we had the Carolina Panthers talking about how bad the Patriots were this week, but they go to Tampa Bay. They actually put up 18 points. They were close to getting 20 points in that game with Frank Reich being gone there. I never really felt like they were going to win that game, but Tampa Bay ends up winning it 21-18. But the real storyline coming out of that game is Mike Evans ties Jerry Rice all time for having 10 receiving seasons in a row over 1,000 yards. What an incredible accomplishment for Mike Evans. I mean, one of the most underrated receivers in the league. And I feel like whenever people talk about the top 5 receivers of the decade, top 5 receivers of all time, Mike Evans' name really never gets thrown up there, even with AJ Green, Julio Jones, Antonio Brown. He seems like a receiver that's always been overlooked because he's been rotting in Tampa Bay. Besides when Tom Brady was there. And then when Tom Brady was there, Mike Evans was balling out, but the conversation was always about Tom Brady. It was never really focused on Mike Evans here. So I feel like he is a guy. He has the longevity. He has 10 receiving seasons in a row of 1,000 yards. It's one of the biggest accomplishments in NFL history. Literally only one other receiver has done it before, and that is
the greatest of all time.
The greatest of all time.
Yeah, I think that when I think about Mike Evans' career in this situation compared to maybe someone in the past, he reminds me almost, although their play styles are a lot different, Larry Fitzgerald, where Larry Fitzgerald was Mr. Consistent throughout the 2000s, and he was playing with the Matt Leinarts of the world. He was playing with the Jake Plumbers of the world and some of these horrible quarterbacks. So we never talked about him enough. Mike Evans, I know that he had the Tom Brady era, and that definitely elevated him, and he's always been in the mix, but 10 1,000-yard receiving seasons in a row, by the way, which is another impressive feature because he's done it every single year he's been a pro, and he was dealing with the Josh Johnsons of the world. The guy,
Josh Freeman.
Josh Freeman, that's the guy.
Yeah.
Josh Freeman, Jameis Winston.
Fitzy for a little bit.
They had Fitz for a second. Obviously, they had Brady. They've had some pretty abysmal quarterbacks for the most part outside of Tom Brady. And for him to continuously be as consistent as he has, when his career is all said and done, and he's going to have, he currently has over 10,000, obviously, but by the time it's all over, he's got 15, 16, 17,000 receiving yards. Where will he rank all time? I don't think he's going to get the respect he deserves in the all-time rankings, especially when he's compared to some of these other juggernauts. But he deserves to be appropriately praised, especially after this game, because he had a great game. Ended up having, I think, 130 receiving yards in this game. Kind of helped them win this game. Made some big plays when it mattered. But he is a guy, kind of reminds me of Larry Fitzgerald, just as far as legacy-wise is concerned. Played with a lot of horrible quarterbacks, but has been consistent through it all.
Yeah, and of Baker Mayfield's 202 receiving yards, Mike Evans had 162 of those.
Yeah.
Which is incredible against a Panthers defense, which has been pretty frisky. And do you knock the Buccaneers for this game being competitive, or do you think this is a division rival that just lost Frank Reich? Maybe they get a little bit of juice back by not having one of the worst head coaches in NFL history on your team there?
No, I don't give him credit. I don't give him a discount at all. I think the Panthers, I do expect the Panthers to win at least one more game, because I think without Frank Reich there, and now that I think they're going to try to open the playbook up a little bit more for Bryce Young, I do think that I see them winning one more game, maybe two, maybe if they're lucky. But this is a division rival. They're familiar with them. And the Bucs, they're a gritty team, but I think the Panthers are another team where if they can figure it out even just a little bit on offense, then I think they can steal a game there. And I thought for a second they might have against the Bucs here, but I think that I give credit to the Bucs for pulling it out.
Yeah, definitely give credit to the Bucs for pulling it out. And then after watching that Atlanta Falcons game, are you leaning more towards the Tampa Bay Buccaneers being able to win the division, especially with Derek Carr having a basically concussion, shoulder, and back injury there? So he's done. Then we have Jameis Winston rapping to people on the sideline there, and then Atlanta just stinking it up in New York. So that game this week is really going to tell the story. But does this give you more confidence in Tampa Bay, or you just need to wait till Sunday?
Well, I think are they all? I think they're one game behind the Falcons currently. I think they're 5-7 now.
Yeah,
and I'm rooting for the Bucs to win this one, because of the three quarterbacks, we have Desmond Ridder, at this point Jameis Winston, and then Baker Mayfield. I think if the NFL really is kind of manipulating these games and they're pushing for something, Baker Mayfield in the playoffs is a hell of a lot more exciting than Desmond Ridder at this point. It's a hell of a lot more exciting than Jameis Winston, although Jameis Winston is one of those guys that I cannot take my eyes off when he's playing the game, for better or for worse. He is both a chaotic good and a chaotic evil at the same time. He is great to watch, but I think the Bucs are a team that I think are a lot more complete than these other teams. Maybe they don't have the same weapons as the Saints do, and maybe they don't have the offensive mastermind of Arthur Smith, but this is a team that I would root for them to make the playoffs in this case. So yes, I think that I feel more comfortable with them. I have more faith in them if they could just get a running game.
Yeah, I think the running game's the huge issue there, and I don't have confidence for them to get the running game. However, what I do trust is their experience, because they do have a lot of the same guys that were on that Super Bowl team with Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. Then on the defensive end, still have Shaq Barrett there. You still have Devin White. You still have Winfield Jr. You still have Vita Vea manning the middle of that defensive line here, and you still have Levante David on that team. So if there is a team that could maybe go up against Dallas, I know they got blown out last year, but anything can happen in the NFL playoffs, especially when you're hosting a home game in Tampa and it's Baker Mayfield versus Dak Prescott, which would just be a spectacle to see. It is something I am rooting for and pushing for at this point. And especially like Desmond Ridder. I mean, come on. The last game came down to it's like a 60-yard bomb from Young Hoku to win the last game. So it was pretty back and forth last time. So I think the Bucs defense can stop Atlanta and then give a team like Dallas maybe a little bit of a fight in the first half. Maybe it goes the same way Seattle versus San Francisco went, where first half it's a game and then they just blow the doors off them.
Yeah, I suspect that.
And then our last game of the 1 o'clock slate, we had the Detroit Lions going up against the Green Bay Packers on Thursday. A lot of people were ready to jump off ship there, but that was until the Green Bay Packers had their spectacle that we'll cover on Sunday night. But then they go to New Orleans off a loss here, and now Detroit is cementing themselves as one of the best teams off a loss in the league, where you have them jump out to a 21-0 lead. Sam Laporta, here you go. Jahmyr Gibbs making electric runs here. And then David Montgomery making electric runs there. Jamison Williams out of the backfield. Amon-Ra St. Brown out of the backfield. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown is now on pace to have more total yards in his first 3 years than Megatron.
Yeah, he has the most receiving yards of any Lion of all time. He's surpassed Calvin Johnson in this game. And Amon-Ra, I'm interested to see where he falls in the receiving. I think he's on pace to have 1,400 receiving yards this year. So continuously getting better each and every year. My one worry that I had with the Lions in this game was they came out to that 21-0 lead, and it felt like that they took their foot off the gas a little bit. They saw the Saints come back a little bit. I think they always had control of the game, but that was my one concern with them. I know their defense has taken a bit of a step back the last few weeks as well. That's my big concern with them overall. But this is a team that they're almost impossible to stop offensively, especially with, you know who I'm about to talk about, Sam Laporta, baby. We're talking about a guy I knew in the draft when they drafted this guy that he was going to fit their culture. He's a good blocker, and he's a vertical threat. And I think that he's already kind of cemented himself as one of those elite tight ends in the league already. But continuously moving forward next year, he could enter himself into a George Kittle conversation, into a Mark Andrews conversation. He fits that offense fantastically, especially with the runs they've been able to enable. Then you have someone like an Amon-Ra who they're using as like a Deebo Samuel at this point. Then you have a Jameson Williams who maybe they try to fit into like a Brandon Ayuk role. This is a team that their offense, especially with Jahmyr Gibbs good and going, especially with David Montgomery being that physical back, this is a team that even if they do kind of take their foot off the brake a little bit defensively, they're still able to put up 33 points easily.
Does it worry you that it seems like they play with their food a little bit? They kind of almost remind me of when the Celtics were coming up here. When Tatum and Brown were younger, they're kind of playing with their food a little bit, where they jump out to a lead, especially in that Cleveland series, and they kind of would play with their food, and then those teams would make a game that really should never have been a game to begin with. Do you think that's fine when you're up 21-0 and then they took their foot off the gas, or do you want to just see them go out there and just pedal to the metal the whole game?
I want them to be pedal to the metal the whole game, because if they continue with these lapses, they're not going to be able to do that with the Niners, the Eagles, the Cowboys. They're not going to be able to do that with the top teams in the NFC. And earlier in the season, they were that team that played a full 60 minutes. And the last few weeks, they haven't been that same team. So I want to see them get back to playing a full 60 minutes, because when they do so, this game could have been 45-10. They could have had a Dolphins game if they kept their foot on the gas, but taking a little bit off. I know they're a young team at the end of the day, so I'm not going to completely tear them to shreds, but that is a concern that I have for them moving forward.
Okay. And then a lot of people were really critical after this week and then going to the prior 2 weeks where Jared Goff was protecting the football. Then he had 2 games with 3 turnovers. And then this game seems like the Saints adjusted on defense, and he seemed a little bit lost throughout the rest of the game after they jumped up 21-0. Are you still a believer in Jared Goff being the guy, or do you think the Lions should look to greener pastures there?
I think they should always look to the head. I know that they drafted Hendon Hooker last year. I know he's recovering from an ACL injury, so he's not going to get a lot of reps, but I think they're going to kind of see what they have with him. I know Jared Goff's contract expires in 2 years, and he's got a pretty fair contract, especially where he could be getting paid $40 to $45 million for what he demands at this point. I am worried about how he's played down the stretch, but he's got about a month left to kind of clean back and get back to his old ways. I'm not going to take my foot off the gas for him quite yet, but if he continues to play like he's played the last month, then they should keep their eyes open and keep their options open at that point.
Yeah, because for me, it's like I need to see Jared Goff. Like, you can go through all of these minimal, nitpicks, and then he did have the 3 turnovers where he was protecting the ball. It seemed like the Saints were able to adjust and make life uncomfortable for him. And I think, sure, you can make that point about Jared Goff, but also this is a Detroit Lions defense that had been more dominant earlier in the season. It seems like as the season has gone on, they haven't been making the same adjustments there. Their defensive line hasn't looked as dominant. They haven't been making as many plays in the secondary as they were earlier in the season, where you can say, sure, Jared Goff did have some turnovers there, but we do need to also see that defense step up. And you could make one of 2 arguments, like, well, you were up 21-0. How hard. Do you really want that defense to push it to the metal, or you're up 21-0? You should be able to tee off on the passer and really rally up some sacks because, well, Ali McNeil is someone who's looked great. He does look a little bit undersized for his position. And then at times Aiden Hutchinson can disappear throughout the game, but they are getting CJ Gardner-Johnson back. And, well, it could be a year next year where maybe they make that jump and they just win a playoff game this year, which is still monumental for what the Detroit Lions are doing. And it's a great step forward. It's like you can look at Jared Goff, but you also have to look a little bit deeper into that defense here as well.
Yeah, and if I'm the Lions, you see the pieces that you have. You have Brian Branch, who's been great for them. You see, obviously, Aiden Hutchinson. I want to see him make that next jump. And at points this season, I've seen him make that jump. Ali McNeil, we like Ali McNeil. And obviously, they have some decent linebackers as well. But I want to see them go after and get that next big piece, someone that's going to fortify that defense. And I think Chase Young is somebody that should be in the mix for them. And maybe there's some other guys that they can maybe trade some draft capital for. To
Max
bolster.
Crosby. He wants to be there.
Max Crosby. If the Raiders decide to blow it up, go ahead and give them a first-round pick for Max Crosby because you get Max Crosby, Ali McNeil, and Aiden Hutchinson. Aiden Hutchinson, I think, is better as a 2 on that defensive line because you get him there, then I think he really starts to open things up for them. So I think going into the next stretch of games, they have about 5 more games left. If they can continue, if they can go back to where they were the first half of the season, then I believe in them. I definitely think they can still win that playoff game. I think that's almost a guarantee. I believe in them a lot there. But when you face off against these juggernauts, you have to play like you played the first half.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we'll see the Lions kind of retool. I think you see some of these teams who start off hot to begin the year start to cool off. Then they have a few weeks where they really have to look introspectively. And then that's when you see the really good coaching take over because I feel like Shane Steichen is coaching his ass off, just scheming those run games. And now we're seeing Jameson Williams come out of the backfield. And he's a piece that really hasn't been fully integrated in. And I was watching Chris Sims talk about him where at the combine, he was someone like Tyreek Hill, who was just blowing the doors off of people with his raw speed there. So I think Jared Goff being able to find him along with Amon-Ra St. Brown, both those guys coming out of the backfield, I think that's really what's going to help them compete with San Francisco and Dallas. And then you talked about Sam Laporta, and I can vouch that Sam Laporta was a guy, as soon as they drafted him, you're like, yo, look at this guy that the Lions drafted. He's a beast. Look at his highlights in college. And what he's doing as a rookie tight end is kind of unheard of. Like for Sam Laporta to come out as a rookie tight end and do this, I can't really remember any tight ends in their rookie year being this dominant because typically for a tight end, it's a position you need to take a few years, learn the route running. You have to take some time to get the blocking up and maybe bulk up a little bit and then come into your, as they say, man body when you have to bulk up, add some muscle on there. But he's a guy who has looked like a Travis Kelce or George Kittle where you throw him the ball, he can take it 20 yards. He's been getting touchdowns all year. He's been in the conversation for rookie of the year. How great is him so far? And then how much of an impact is he going to be as a like George Kittle type player, Travis Kelce type player for the Lions going forward?
I think he's going to be right up there. I don't know if I can put him Travis Kelce yet because Travis Kelce, top 3 tight end of all time. But I do think that when we're looking into the top 5 tight ends next year, I'm going to put him in the top 5 at this point because you have Travis Kelce who could retire after this year. And then you have Mark Andrews. He's been banged up. George Kittle, he's got a couple of wear on his tires. And then from there, you can put Sam Laporta at number 4 at that point. And I feel comfortable doing that. There's some other guys that you can shout out, of course. But as far as like rookie tight ends, like Sam Laporta, he stepped in and he's already submitted himself as a top 5, top 6 tight end in the NFL. Credit to the Lions, credit to Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell for finding him because I think he was a 3rd-round pick, fitting the culture immediately. I think he could still have that 1,000-yard season his rookie year, but I haven't really seen a tight end take over like this since maybe, dare I say, Rob Gronkowski when he first started with the Patriots because he kind of started hitting the ground running immediately. But credit to him. I think that next year is when he really makes that second leap and becomes arguably their number 1.
Yeah. And then I think that's a great place to end with the Detroit Lions because when you talk about a team who has the owner, the quarterback, and the coach are all on the same page, you're like, wow, what a great chemistry this is. How well run are the Lions here who's been dysfunctional. Then you have 2 other teams here where you look at their coach, you look at their quarterback, You look at the GM, how they've drafted, how dysfunctional these franchises have been. You look at the Patriots. You look at the Chargers. You have the documents. You have the stats. Just how bad was this game?
Well, we talked about the Seahawks and Cowboys game to start, and the refs had more yards in that game than both of these teams had. The Chargers had 244 yards of offense, and I know the Patriots, they have given up less than 10 points in 3 straight games, and yet they are 0-3, which has not happened since 1938, since the Chicago Cardinals, not the Chicago Bears, the Chicago Cardinals. And you know what happened to the Chicago Cardinals? They moved to St. Louis and became the St. Louis Cardinals. You're probably thinking, wait, isn't that a baseball team? You're right. They were a baseball team. And then like, you know what? Let me go to the desert. We're going to be the Arizona Cardinals. And that's where they are now. And then they have averaged 12.5 points a game. 12.5 points a game, which has not happened since the 2011 Rams, who, by the way, offensive coordinator Josh McDaniels. Of course, when shit smells, you can tell that there's shit near. And this is the same team, this Rams team that they're at the new low of. This is a team that had Sam Bradford. Their number one receiver was Brandon Lloyd, another old Patriot. And then they had Cadillac Williams at running back.
Did McDaniels, was his offering to the Patriots, yeah, if I come back, I'll bring our number one wide receiver? Patriots sweet deal, then it's Brandon Lloyd.
Yeah. This Patriots team, it reaches new lows. And I think I'm finally starting to realize what's wrong with the Patriots. And it took me a couple weeks, took me about 12 to be exact. I saw them play against the Eagles and the Cowboys and all these other teams, the Bills. And this last 3 weeks, I think I know what's wrong with their team.
What is it?
I think it's their offense.
Wait, really?
I think it's their offense. The last 3 weeks, they've given up 26 points combined over the 3 weeks. So if you do the math, that's about 8.5 points a game. And that's just not enough for them to win because they have scored 13 points over the last 3 weeks, which combines for 4 points.
Wait, so they've scored 13 points a week, right?
No, 13 points over the last 3 weeks.
Oh, okay. That's not good.
That's not good at all, considering
the Bruins have probably scored more over their last 3 games than that.
Yeah. And when you're getting outscored by, we can look at how many teams that outscored them this week over the last 3 weeks. We got about 20 teams that have scored more this week than the Patriots have scored the last month.
I have one. The Panthers.
The Panthers, the lowly, dare I say, Panthers have outscored them. This is a new low for them. And you thought that, if you would have told me this would have happened last year when a defensive coordinator was the offensive coordinator, I'd be like, that makes sense. But they brought in an actual offensive coordinator, a guy that was successful in Alabama, who was successful with the organization, the New England Patriots, and hell, even the Texans, where they were successful with. And they've somehow gotten worse offensively with an actual offensive coordinator. There's so many things here. And now they do the offensive carousel where Mac Jones, he was the scapegoat. He sucked. I know what'll fix our problems. We'll put in the lesser Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi. Oh, turns out Bailey Zappi is not the guy. Who would have thought? And then Malik Cunningham, who's playing musical chairs with the practice squad right now. Not figuring out, oh, wait, this guy might be something. We don't know because we haven't fucking played him at all. And then Will Grier, he comes, he goes, he comes, he goes. I think the problem might be the offense. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you may be onto something because I was hearing all year long from Patriots fans. They're just like, wow, we stole Devontae Parker from the Miami Dolphins. What an impact he's going to make. I can't even believe that the Dolphins would let us have him. And then they're like, getting Juju Smith-Schuster, who was the number 1 wide receiver on the Super Bowl Chiefs team. The fact that his knee is going to blow up in the next few years. We got him on a deal, though. He was the number 1 wide receiver from the Super Bowl. And then Tyquan Thornton, they're like, let's just give this guy a chance, Let's give him a chance. And then what does he do as soon as Patriots fans call? Yeah, we got to give the kid a chance sometime. Well, he T-Rexes a pass where Bailey Zappi actually throws a pretty good ball, hits him in stride, and Tyquan Thornton has the speed where he could have run through that ball and then got a touchdown in that game, which would have been enough to win. And then he just goes, and then falls like the mighty T-Rex. He looks like a clown doing it. He falls to the ground, looks absolutely ridiculous. And then Hunter Henry has been missed on this team. And then I've heard some New England fans call Hunter Henry like, well, he's our number one wide receiver. Well, the problem with that is he's not a wide receiver there. So I always thought they were going to be a terrible offense, but like I thought Bill O'Brien would build the offense this year, not make it worse. And for me with the Patriots, this has to be on purpose, right? Because when we look at coaches, we looked at Frank Reich. Well, it's like he's an offensive coach. Indianapolis's offense is clearly better with Shane Steichen this year than it was with Frank Reich last year. And then you look at him with Carolina. The offense is clearly underachieving, but the defense is playing well. Well, you look at the Patriots, Bill Belichick and his $25 million a year salary. The defense is still playing really well, and that's without Christian Gonzalez. He's out. Matthew Judon, best player for the Patriots, best player on their team, he's out, and their defense is still locking teams down like they typically do in December here. So you're at a point where you have to take some of the offensive power away from Bill Belichick, bring in another guy who can draft, because it's not like the Patriots miss on wide receivers and draft someone like a Nelson Aguilar where it's like, okay, that's an NFL receiver, but he just wasn't a number one guy. You just suck at drafting wide receivers. It's like, no. Anytime they draft a wide receiver, it's like, it's not even an NFL player and you don't even know where they're finding these guys. Like, okay, you had that stretch where you had Kembrell Tompkins drafted, Aaron Dobson, and then your first round pick, we all know about N'Keal Harry, who's the other first round wide receiver they drafted in the early 2000s, who's terrible.
There's too many to count.
And then you're bringing in players like you can't even recruit them. You give up a second round pick for Mohamed Sanu when you could have brought in Emmanuel Sanders for the same value, and Julio Jones was traded for a second round pick the next year. So it's not even like you're just missing, but you still end up with like at least a 3 here. You're just flat out missing wide receivers, and you can't bring them in free agency. So it's like Mac Jones is a problem. I don't think he's a good quarterback. Yes. Bailey Zappi is not a good quarterback, yes, but you're still missing so dramatically where how are you not even drafting NFL receivers at this point when you see players like Puka Nacua who go in the 5th round here? So then it's like, is this a problem with straight up drafting or is this a problem with development? And then you look and you're like, these receivers go other places and they don't do anything. So
They
it's
disappear.
not. Yeah, they disappear. They fall off the map. You don't know where they went. It's like the earth was flat and it's like you just boat off the map. Boom. New England wide receiver. Same thing there. So it's like with that, and then you can't even give Belichick too much grief because he's never been good and he's always been able to rely on, I don't know, the greatest quarterback ever. And that's why it was such a perfect marriage, because even when you had Gronk, he was your number one wide receiver, and you at least had someone like Julian Edelman. Is Julian Edelman, like, I think he would be a good wide receiver in the NFL, but is he more than a Hunter Renfrow without Tom Brady?
I think he would have been like, I don't know. I don't want to compare him to Cooper Kupp because not by any means, but he's more of a slot guy. He's more of like maybe like a Hunter Renfrow, maybe like he would have been like the 20th best receiver in the league at any point.
Yeah.
And that's not a knock on Julian Edelman. Julian Edelman was great for him, and they had a nice formidable offense. But you look outside of those two guys, right? The Philip Dorsets. Well, I'll tell you what happened to Philip Dorsett when he left. He went to the Seahawks and was the 5th receiver, and they cut him.
Colts? Yeah.
And then he went, they had the N'Keal Harry, who they traded for a 7th round pick. And you look at that wide receiver draft. Every other receiver in that draft, whether it was Deebo Samuel or Hunter Renfrow or Deontay Johnson or A.J. Brown, every other receiver in that draft from the very next pick all the way until the end of the draft were all better than N'Keal Harry. And then we look at this draft with Tyquan Thornton. The very next, you want to know how I knew Tyquan Thornton was going to be a bust? I looked at the draft. Patriots draft, Tyquan Thornton. I'm like, oh, great. Didn't even hear him in the draft. Whatever. The very next pick was George Pickens. Let me tell you what, George Pickens, maybe he hasn't played up to the level he's capable of in Pittsburgh. He's a hell of a lot better than Tyquan Thornton. And I knew immediately, I'm like, of course the Steelers take George Pickens. He's going to be a star, and he's been good for them. No matter what they do, they need to get somebody in there offensively. Maybe they try to do what the Commanders did with having a Ron Rivera and Eric Bieniemy. Maybe they try and do that co-head coaching. Somebody who can take the reins away from Belichick offensively.
Yeah.
Because this offense is about to enter near lows. They have the 28th worst points per game ever currently. And it's only going to get worse if they continue to not score, I don't know, touchdowns. They haven't scored a touchdown in a month at this point.
Yeah.
It's disgusting. It's abysmal. And I know it's quarterbacks and all that, but
Do you think they know they can throw a forward pass, though?
honestly, I don't know if they do.
Yeah, because like it was at a point where if you listen to like some of the radio broadcasts, there's a clip that came out of the announcer where he's like banging his head up against the wall. It's like, can you guys do something instead of just flat to bubble to run to flat to bubble to slant to flat to bubble? It's like every single play. It's like, can you guys just throw a go route? Then you have players like Chris Sims, former NFL players, like, I don't think the Patriots know that they can throw a forward pass. This is a team that looks like their offense looks like they're ready to put leather helmets on.
Yeah.
And go out there. So it's like, but on the other side, you're like, damn, this defense is actually really good, because how's your defense still that good with the offense being this bad? Well, it's also a testament to how bad the Chargers offense is as well.
Which is great to pivot to, because we all know what the Chargers are. We've talked about them vehemently on this show. We talked about the text between that Chargers fan, the super fan, how heartbroken he was. And I really thought that there was a point in time in this game that the Patriots were going to win 7-6, and how heartbreaking that poor Chargers fan was going to be. But they ended up pulling through. Brandon Staley, the mastermind that is Brandon Staley, shut down the Patriots, shut them out. But the Chargers, you scored 6 points. You scored, like, even when the Chargers win, we say this every week, even when they win, they lose. And in this game, they still lost. You scored 6 points. You had 244 yards of offense with Justin Herbert, a top 10 quarterback in the league. Austin Eckler.
Are you sure?
Some may say a top 10 running back in this league. Keenan Allen, who is still a very formidable number one wide receiver in the NFL. Gerald Everett, fine tight end as well. And they have some players on the offensive line that are good as well. And they scored 6 points. 6 points? You have Kellen Moore. It wasn't like he was a bad offensive coordinator in Dallas. 6? And I know you're going to say, oh, well, the Patriots defense. No. You're the Chargers offense. You have a Justin Herbert who's making $265 million. You have Austin Eckler, who is trying to get paid. You have Keenan Allen, who is of this generation, you could put him in as one of the best of the generation. And you mustered 6 points against a lowly Patriots team who might not win a game the rest of the season, who's trying to get Caleb Williams. This is what you hit. This is what you did. Even when the Chargers win, they lose.
Yeah, even when the Chargers win, they lose. And it's just a testament to the consistency of the Chargers and why you can make fun of them for all of their woes that they've had. You at least know what you're going to get with the Chargers, where no matter who they play, whether it's the Dallas Cowboys, it's going to be a one-possession game. Herbert will have the ball in his hands, chance to win that game. Whether it's versus the New England Patriots, you still have a chance to lose that game, even after you only scored 6 points. So you look at a team and you're like, okay, well, what are they doing well right now? What's the head coach's specialty? At least, Brian Staley was able to shut out a team, and I don't care what NFL team you're facing, whether it's the worst team since 1938. Shutting out an NFL team is still a hard feat to accomplish, so we can at least compliment Brandon Staley's defense a little bit, right?
Sure. Yeah, you know what? He did shut him out, and that's very rare in the NFL. I think it was their first shutout since 2017. So give them credit there. He is the mastermind there. Maybe he keeps his job now. He's 5-7 now. Who knows?
5-7 now. So Chargers, consistency is key. You know what you're going to get from them. It's going to be a one possession, one score game between 6 and 7 points here. Patriots still floundering at this point. And then we have some more games to go over here. Let's go over the 4 o'clock slate here. We had the new look Cleveland Browns. Talk about how much you love Joe Flacco on the Browns.
Yeah, I love it. Number 15 for them. And I don't know if it's maybe my childhood stepping in, because I remember how that absolutely eclectic tear that he had with the Ravens to win the Super Bowl, get his money, and then just continue to be average after that. But seeing him on the Browns, I was like, you know what? I like this Browns team a little bit more, because when they had PJ Walker, I'm like, come on, I can't believe in this team. When they had DTR, I'm like, no, try again. Another guy. They bring in Joe Flacco, who he's filled in for the Jets. He's filled in for a number of other teams since the Ravens, and
Looked pretty good with the Jets at times.
he did. He looked better than Zach Wilson, dare I say. But he fills in, and I know they didn't win this game, but I like this Browns team moving forward, especially if their defense can go what they've been playing to all year. They can still upset a lot of teams. Joe Flacco knows how to get it to his guys, and I'm here for it. I'm here for the Joe Flacco era Browns, and imagine they make the playoffs.
Yeah.
And the ageless wonder that is Joe Flacco emerges from the shadows and wins a playoff game.
What did Elijah Moore say?
What did he say?
He said about Joe Flacco, watching Joe Flacco throw is like watching poetry in motion. And I can't blame him when you go from, I don't know, PJ Walker and DTR needs CPR throwing you balls here. Like, yeah, when you go from Dorian Thompson, whatever his name is,
Dorian Thomason Robinson.
Who cares? To Joe Flacco in this game. Like, yeah, he's a guy who can actually throw the football, has a natural throwing motion. And you go to LA, and then all I can say is, wow. Puka Nacua. I looked at Puka Nacua and thought he was a great receiver. Then I watched this game and I was like, wow, what a great receiver Puka Nacua is.
Yeah, Puka Nacua is a monster in this game. And I think he had 130 receiving yards or something like that. He broke loose in a few plays. I know that.
Yeah, he broke loose on a few plays, really broke the game open, and you're starting to see the trust really build with him and Matt Stafford. And Puka Nacua was kind of a phenom at the beginning of the year, and he helped them win their only game outside of their division before this one, which was versus the Indianapolis Colts in overtime. That was Puka Nacua's first touchdown of his career in overtime. And then you have him versus the Cleveland Browns here, and then Puka Nacua goes off. So now you have a legitimate 1-2 punch, and now you have kind of a good, at least a little bit of a better run game emerging for the LA Rams than we have had the past few weeks, because it seems like now with their receivers, Puka Nacua seems like just someone who's an explosive receiver who can break the game open, where Cooper Kupp, maybe he's lost a little bit of a step, but can still be that reliable third down guy who can get a possession, and he can also still house it if he wants to now. But now you're actually getting a consistent run game with the Rams, where in the Cowboys game, it just looked like the Cowboys were ready to tee off versus the Rams there. And then you really kick that offense into high gear. So now when we're looking at teams, my big problem with the Rams, I'm just like, okay, I know you've been really good in your division. You gave the 49ers fits. You gave them one of the toughest games. You gave the Philadelphia Eagles a tough game, but you got blown out by the Dallas Cowboys, and you'd only won one game outside of your division. Now that you go out there, beat a tough defense in the Cleveland Browns, even though Myles Garrett's maybe banged up a little bit, you still did drop 36 points, and it seems like the LA Rams are peaking at the right time. So is this a team now where you're like, okay, they've beaten Seattle, I think they beat Seattle both times, right? Yeah, you beat Seattle twice. So now you have the tiebreaker with the Seattle Seahawks when you inevitably are in that wild card race. Is this a team you could see making that playoff jump in the next few weeks?
Yeah, I think so, because you have the brains there with Sean McVay, and Matt Stafford's been there before. I give credit to Matt Stafford. And I think with Kyron Williams returning for them, he's really been their bell cow this year, and he was out for a series of weeks, and you could definitely see that they missed him because they were having a hard time running the football. With him back, I think that they can run the football relatively well. You still have Cooper Kupp there. You have Puka Nacua, who's emerged. Talk about a guy who can actually draft receivers. With the limited draft picks they've had, Puka Nacua has been a home run pick for them. So give a lot of credit there. He's definitely in the Rookie of the Year race there.
Yeah.
And now they have a dynamic too, where you have to stop at least one of them. And it's not really easy to do for either of them. Puka Nacua can get loose at any point, and Cooper Kupp seems to be Matt Stafford's safety blanket a lot of times. Now that they have somebody else to throw it to besides Cooper Kupp, now they actually have a relatively dynamic offense. And their defense has played at some spots. They get to play when it matters. When I looked at their defense to start the season, I'm like, who else but Aaron Donald? Because I didn't know anybody else on that team. But you see someone like a Kobe Durant there who's been stepping up, and they've been making plays with some of their young guys. So I give them a lot of credit there. I think that they're going to be a frisky team. Whether they make the playoffs or not, I guess remains to be seen. We'll go through it in the playoff preview, but they're frisky. They're getting hot at the right time, and I definitely think that they can make the playoffs for sure.
Yeah, I think they can make the playoffs, and then if the 49ers make the jump to the 1 seed and they slide in at the 7 seed, what's the Philadelphia Eagles' weakness? the secondary. What is something that the LA Rams could expose with that 1-2 punch? It's like, okay, now how are you going to go out there and slow down Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp? But really what it comes back to is, are we going to get the clean, crisp, turnover-free Matt Stafford that throws for 274 and 3 touchdowns like he did in this game? Or are we going to get the Matt Stafford that throws for maybe 350, but he has 2 picks and a fumble?
Yeah, that's the thing. You don't know what to get every given week, but he's won a Super Bowl. They've been in the playoffs in the past. They're going to be frisky for whoever they face.
And then talking about frisky teams here, teams that are really starting to come into their own and show out. We had Deebo Samuel say, if Brock Purdy played that whole game, the 49ers would have been in the Super Bowl. We would have beaten the Kansas City Chiefs in that game and would have been crowned the Super Bowl victors this year. And then they go out there, pretty much stomp Philadelphia. Philadelphia had those 2 really good drives, but they ended up holding them to field goals here. So now starting to see the San Francisco 49ers defense really come into their own, which was something that let them down in that 3-game losing streak. Starting to see Deebo Samuel come into his own, because as soon as the Philadelphia Eagles would get close, Deebo Samuel would break it open, have a big play in this game, and get down the field for a touchdown. Do you think this was a situation where San Francisco was up for this game more than Philadelphia, and Philadelphia was kind of gassed because they just had 3 straight heavyweight fights? Or do you think this is just the San Francisco 49ers are just better than the Eagles at this point?
I think a lot of it is the Eagles. They face the Chiefs, they face the Bills, and then now they face the 49ers. And this is the Eagles also are a team that can afford to lose this game. I know they obviously didn't want to lose this game, but they're still the number 1 seed. I think that seeing a team like the 49ers, who they had this game marked on their calendar from the start of the season, they're like, we're going to face this Eagles team and give them a load of business, because before Brock Purdy got hurt in that NFC title game, it was a close game and anything could have happened in that game. So I think they felt slighted about what happened in the NFC title game. I think they thought they should have been in the Super Bowl and could have possibly won that game. So I do think that the 49ers came in amped, ready to go, ready to punch him in the mouth. And that's exactly what they did. They punched him in the mouth. They took Jalen Hurts out of the front runner for the MVP. And when they face again, inevitably in the playoffs, I don't see it going the same way as it did in this game. I think it'll be a lot closer. But I think these are 2 teams that are evenly matched, but one came ready to rock.
Yeah, one came ready to rock and roll, and I do think this is good that they split here, because now if they meet again in the NFC Championship, which is probably where they would meet if these teams do inevitably face off, and if the Detroit Lions don't beat the San Francisco 49ers in the divisional round, which they very well could, depending on injuries at that time and overall health of the teams. I feel like for me, I have 2 problems at this point of the season with the Philadelphia Eagles. The first one is I don't think the run game is as good as it should be. You have a good offensive line there, and I think D Swift getting banged up in that game, he did continue to play, but I think him, Kenneth Gainwell, Boston Scott, I don't think the run game is on the same level as the San Francisco 49ers. I think passing wise, where you get the edge is if Jalen Hurts gets a bye to get fully healthy, you'd be able to win it. But I do think the San Francisco 49ers defense overall is a more dominant unit than the Philadelphia Eagles, because you look around, you have Javon Hargrave, who the Philadelphia Eagles let go to the San Francisco 49ers, and they pick up Chase Young, and you have Nick Bosa, and Nick Bosa and Javon Hargrave are one of the best rushing duos in the league. And then you have Ward there in the secondary. You have Deommodore Lenoir, who's been one of the best corners in the league so far this year. And then you have Fred Warner, and then you still have some other linebackers that are elite. And what we're seeing is in the NFL this year is the defenses are catching up to the offenses this year. So used to be you have a good pass rusher, you have a good linebacker, and then you have someone good in your secondary. Now it's like, no, you need to be like 4 or 5 positions deep at every single level, and the Philadelphia Eagles are really relying on their front 7 to carry them. And while they do have good players in their secondary, you have veteran players in your league who have been really good, potential all-pro, but not quite there, and Kevin Byard. You don't have Hall of Fame players in that secondary, and I just don't see how you'll be able to contain Debo, Ayuk, McCaffrey, and George Kittle on a given Sunday. And the main credit that Brock Purdy gets is He's not the biggest arm in the world. He's not the tallest guy in the world, but he can process information faster than every other quarterback in the league. We talked about how Sam Darnold unsolicitedly walked up to Greg Olson because they had that relationship in Carolina. He's like, hey, this guy is smarter than any other quarterback I've played with, college, high school, or in the NFL. And he just processes and reads the information, his pre-snap manipulation. And this is a guy who's pretty much in his rookie year still because he hopped into it in the middle of last year. He didn't get to go through that playoff run. So Brock Purdy is going to still be getting better over the next 2 or 3 years. Look at how long it took Jalen Hurts to really make that leap. Look at how long it took Carson Wentz or some of these, or Lamar Jackson, to really take that leap into the next level of being that next star quarterback. And with Brock Purdy, it's just the more information he gets, it's like a movie where the AI is the villain, and the more information, the more time they get to process it, the more dynamic and deadly they're going to be, because all he has to do is, okay, we're moving the play here. Now I check down to Debo, 20 yards, check down to Kittle. And then just the way he can manipulate the defense is going to give the Niners the extra edge, because I'm worried about the Eagles secondary and then them relying on their front seven too much. And I'm worried that the Eagles can't get a lead and then just hand the ball off to DeAndre Swift. And they kind of have to have these grind out one possession wins there. So I do think it'll be a good rematch here, but I'm leaning San Francisco at this point, just with how dynamic their weapons are. And then San Francisco, been to 2 Super Bowls, lost both of them. Philadelphia Eagles, been to 2 Super Bowls. They've won one of them with this regime here, but I don't know.
I think that what could happen is with the Eagles' schedule moving forward, and we'll look at that again when we go through the preview, but I think they're just going to be more exhausted. And it really, I think it's going to come down to injuries.
Yeah.
If we say like Trent Williams gets banged up, then I think that maybe the Eagles take the edge. The Eagles, I trust them to put up a fight better than they did this past game. However, the 49ers, this is their year. I think they know that. I think they feel slighted from last year. And they definitely have the best roster in the NFL. There's no question there. So the edge there, I still can't quite really like pick one or the other, because I think it's going to come down to injuries at the end of it. And right now, I think the Eagles are a little bit healthier. But at the same time, adding Chase Young has added another layer to that defensive line. And I do think the Eagles might still have the edge on the edge line there. But overall, this team, I think they see the Eagles. They want to spit on their stadium. They don't like them. They're rivals. And I think that they feel slighted from what happened last year. So they're going to come ready to rock when that playoff game does inevitably come.
And then after the game, or in the middle of the game, we had a fight I want to talk about. Greenlaw kind of pushed the guy out of bounds, maybe takes that a little bit further than a lot of people would have liked. And then the Philadelphia Eagles head of security, who's kind of a local legend there, kind of puts his hand on him. And then Greenlaw, I don't even think he went to throw a punch. It looked like he was just pointing at him. Like, please tell me who throws a punch like this. Like his fingers were out. Like, sure, if he's trying to break his fingers, I guess, but I didn't really think that warranted both guys being ejected. And the fact that people are freaking out, thinking like, oh, this guy needs to be banned from the NFL forever. He should never be allowed in an NFL stadium again. And how could you let this happen in an NFL game? I'm like, really? Because every player that talked about it was like, no, this is fun. I like that this happened. Like, of course, this is going to like motivate the teams. And it seemed like they gave the Eagles a little bit of juice, but it also gave the 49ers even more juice going forward after that.
Yeah, I think so too. Imagine if in a world the fans decided the punishment. How many players would be banned from the NFL forever? Because I remember when the Aaron Rodgers COVID controversy was occurring, they're like, get him out of the league, put him in handcuffs, put him behind bars. Or when they had, they've had a number of other suspensions as well. The Myles Garrett situation, I think of as well, which was a bad one. But come on now, banning him from the NFL, this is ridiculous. Like, it's a fight. Temperatures are high. Everyone's amped up. Like, it's not that deep, guys. Like, sure, you want to fine him. You want to maybe suspend him a game. By all means, whatever. The fans are ridiculous sometimes. That's all I'm going to say. Fans are ridiculous at points. I'm so glad they don't make the punishments, because they're always just completely outlandish and out of sight.
It's the fans and the media. Like, honestly, do better. All the players are like, yeah, whatever. I don't think either of those guys should have been kicked out of the game. But for that, I was like, who throws a punch like this? like, are you kidding me? Like, that wasn't a punch that he threw. He was just pointing at him, and then he grazed his face. He barely made contact with him. Then for the Philadelphia Eagles security guy, like, yeah, maybe you don't get that hyped up. Maybe you let Jalen Carter, Fletcher Cox, someone like that make the big play, but you don't really need to be stepping into a situation like that. And then Nick Sirianni apologized to Kyle Shanahan after that game, but I do like the bad blood between this team. Does seem like a heavyweight rivalry that's going to take place over the next few years, which I'm excited to play out. Another team that made a huge step forward this week, similar to the Denver Broncos, and I like this team a lot more than the Denver Broncos. Sunday Night Football, we had the Green Bay Packers take on the Kansas City Chiefs, and a lot of people were talking about the refs in this game, but I do think the calls kind of evened out in the situation, and you just saw what they call a makeup call play out in real time. I've played sports before, and I've seen it happen in games where you don't get a call, and then they just give you a call where they don't call it on the other team. And at that point, typically when you're a wide receiver in the NFL, to the like Marquez Valdez-Scantling, you have to be at a level where you earn those pass interference calls. And I get everyone should be on an equal playing field, but if that was Tyreek Hill, that flag would have been thrown immediately. And they probably didn't throw that flag because they just saw Marquez Valdez-Scantling drop another pass similar to that. So the ref was probably, honestly, I didn't think you were going to catch the ball anyways because you've been ass throughout most of the game. And then the Patrick Mahomes flag, I think it was just a makeup call for that because they're like, oh, yeah, we just audibly threw the flag because we freaked out because someone tackled Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah. No, I think in this game, I've been hesitant to embrace the Packers this year because it seems like, I don't want to compare them to the Commanders, but it felt like each week I didn't really know what to get from them. But what I've seen the last 3 weeks, right? Jordan Love's numbers, and this is the guy who we should really applaud because he had a period of time where he was throwing an interception every game. He was throwing inaccurate balls. You didn't really know what to expect from Jordan Love. Well, the last 3 weeks, he has 8 touchdowns, 0 picks, QBR in the 110s, and completion rating in the high 60s. So we're talking about a guy who's playing elite football currently. And in weeks prior, like he had a stretch of games. They lost 4 straight. It looked like they were dead in the water. And now they've won 5 of the last 6 where he's thrown 11 touchdowns, 2 picks. And now on the season, we look at him like he's going to have 3,500 passing yards. He's going to have approaching 30 touchdowns.
Yeah.
He could have potentially like maybe right now he has 10 picks. Maybe he has 13 or 14. But Jordan Love at this point, there was 2 balls in this game. And I think you probably agree.
Yes.
The Romeo Dobbs ball. We all know it.
Romeo.
It was the Romeo, dare art thou Romeo Dobbs catch/ball where he slings it. Very reminiscent of, dare I say, Aaron Rodgers.
On the broadcast, they pulled it up and side-by-sided it.
Dare I say also Brett Favre, another Packers icon as well. You make that throw, we're like, whoa, Jordan Love. I see something there.
Yeah.
And then he made another ball to Christian Watson. We're like, whoa, Jordan Love. Not bad. Pretty good.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm like, oh, okay. Maybe there is something with this Jordan Love kid. Because as we know, this is basically his rookie year. He had some rookie struggles, as we often point to, with some of these other guys who struggle out the gate. But since then, the last 4 weeks, he's played as a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. 11 touchdowns, 2 picks. You can't really argue it there. And moving forward now, it's like, I think with more of these wins and as they approach the playoffs, with him becoming the guy in Green Bay, with the young talent they have with Christian Watson and Jaden Reed and Luke Musgrave when he comes back, Aaron Jones.
Wicks, yeah.
They have some really nice players. They've done a great job draft-wise. The last guy I also want to shout out outside of Jordan Love is none other than Mr. Matt LaFleur.
Coach Eyebrows, yeah.
So this is a team, they were 2-6 at one point. They looked dead in the water. We're like, guess this Packers team, they're going to pack it up, draft a quarterback next year, and rebuild, maybe fire Matt LaFleur. Well, he coached his ass off in this game. He had maybe the best coaching performance I've seen him coach, if not this year, maybe of his career to this point. Beating the defending champions in a convincing fashion, playing good defense, opening the playbook up for Jordan Love to make plays. And they won convincingly, as they should, even with a couple plays that didn't go their way. They played great football, and give a lot of credit to the Packers. They're in the mix now, and they might actually make the playoffs.
Yeah, you have to give a lot of credit to the Green Bay Packers here because you're also playing without Jair Alexander and Aaron Jones, who are arguably your 2 best players on that football team right now. And for me, I was someone who this season, I was like, I can't really make a judgment on Jordan Love until the season is over, because he's going to have these moments where he goes through and struggles. I've seen Josh Allen play horrible for the first 2 years of his career. I've seen Jalen Hurts struggle coming out of his career. The only quarterbacks I've seen, Trevor play pretty terrible coming out of his career. Kenny Pickett wasn't very awe-inspiring, and then Justin Herbert has kind of just stayed the same throughout his entire career, if not regressed. So with Jordan Love, I was like, let's see what happens as the season progresses. I really can't make a judgment till I see him play an entire season. Then he starts 2-6. Really, that Raiders game was the one that gave me cause to pause and was the bad taste I really couldn't get out of my mouth. I'm like, okay, let me keep giving him another shot. And then Jordan Love comes out of the gate, just week in, week out, starts getting better. And then what Matt LaFleur told him was, sometimes you just got to breathe and let it rip. And that's what Jordan Love was doing in this game, because he completed that pass down the field to Romeo Doubs. And what you want to see from your franchise quarterback, numbers are great, you have those, but you want to see that mouth on the floor dropping. Like, I literally got up and was walking around the room. I was like, that was an amazing throw. And then he follows it up with that touchdown pass to Christian Watson. And that's a relationship that's gonna mature and then grow as the season goes on. And one thing the Packers can do is draft extremely well, especially second round wide receivers. We've seen it with the Jordy Nelsons. We've seen it with even someone like Greg Jennings. And now they drafted Devontae. And now you draft Christian Watson. Romeo Doubs is looking a lot better. And then you have Jordan Love, where if a guy makes a mistake, it's not the same as you making a mistake where Aaron Rodgers is throwing you the ball, where he's not going to throw it to you or look your way the rest of the game or the next few weeks. Jordan Love is also making mistakes, so he still has that confidence. And as the game went on, after he completed those two throws, you saw him trying more stuff too. You start to see the confidence build with Jordan Love, where he was trying to do some throws. I'm like, maybe pump the brakes a little bit, but I like the confidence there. And then the throwing motion, they did the side-by-side with Aaron Rodgers. And then with that pass to Romeo Doubs, was like, did you see how far he dropped back in the pocket? Rushers coming at him against the top 5 defense in the league. The Chiefs defense is no slouch. This is the unit that's holding them together. Then he just falls back, falling away, drops it in the bucket with 2 guys right in his face there. So Jordan Love is a guy that could take him over the top. And now that Jordan Love is pushing the ball down the field, what does that do? Well, now you're seeing A.J. Dillon start to get the run game going. So the Green Bay Packers are a very dangerous team, because they do have one of the better defenses in the league, and their defense has great players everywhere. And then you also have Aaron Jones, who could come back, and you would still have a really solid 1-2 punch at running back. And then Luke Musgrave has been one of the better rookie tight ends this year. So you have enough weapons where if you get to the playoffs and you're a little frisky, you could definitely make some noise. And then even people like Colin Cowherd, who are Jordan Love's biggest critic, and that's really what you want to see, is like, who in the media is giving this guy the most grief. You see them start to come around like, wow, this guy is really good. And then with Matt LaFleur, he was someone I'm like, okay, do it without Aaron. And so far, his team faced adversity. How are you going to rally the troops when you struggle at the beginning of the year? And then he rallied the troops here in a way where this could be the most dangerous team that no one wants to face coming into the playoffs there. And if you're Detroit and you get a 3-6 matchup versus the Green Bay Packers, that is probably your worst nightmare for any team in the first round.
Yeah, that's a scary team especially for a team that's in division with them. And we saw what happened on Thanksgiving. Jordan Love absolutely cooking up that secondary. This is a team that, even with how great they played, like, it's a team that nobody's really taking seriously. We know them. They're a bit of in a rebuild. They've been on and off this year, but especially because they've won 3 straight games, and now Jordan Love's looking like a really good quarterback, won 4 of the last 5 games. This team is horrifying. If I'm a team, whether it be the Lions, whether it even be the 49ers or the Eagles, like, this is a team that they have talent everywhere, and they're playing young, and they have nothing to lose at that point. Yeah. And that's the scariest team to face in the playoffs.
I think they're the youngest team in the league. And with that being said, they're offense is even younger than their defense. So that's the time where you see the young teams, you should take a step forward, where Seattle, they're not really taking that jump you should see them be taking, but you're seeing the Green Bay Packers taking that extra leap where some of the older players have to either take the foot off the gas or conserve energy for the playoffs. The Green Bay Packers have another level to go to, I believe, from here. And then you look at their schedule, their next 5 games are cake. So they could easily walk into the playoffs there. And you just have to play your chips right. And then you never know what could happen with Dallas. So just keep winning there. Dallas has a tough schedule. If they fall to Philadelphia this week, all bets are off for the number 5 seed. It's not a lock that Dallas is just going to walk up into that 5 seed. So if you're Green Bay, you have a legitimate chance to make the playoffs. So keep your foot on the gas. Really impressive to see the Packers come around here after struggling out of the gate this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to see how they play throughout the last month of the season.
Yeah, and then we have our last game. We had the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Cincinnati Bengals. We had probably one of the best games of the year, but we thought it would be Trevor versus Joe Burrow in this game, and I don't think it even would have been that much different if those guys played with how electric these teams were. But Trevor unfortunately goes down. It's a high ankle sprain. That's something where typically you're looking at 2 to 4 weeks depending on how bad that sprain is. So Trevor, he's going to be sidelined for a few weeks here. So prayers up to Trevor. Hopefully he can get back on the field for the sake of the NFL playoffs. But Jake Browning was dynamic. He had that tough first week versus the Pittsburgh Steelers with these young guys. You have to give him some time, and T. Higgins comes back, and Joe Mixon rises to the occasion because he knows he needs to help out his rookie quarterback. T. Higgins rises to the occasion. Jamar Chase had that electric touchdown, and he's showing you why he's one of the best receivers in the league. He's going to get it no matter who's throwing him the football there. And then he was able to lead them down the field to win that game versus Jacksonville. And then you had Tyler Boyd, didn't really rise to the occasion and threw an interception there and almost blew the game for them. But other than that, Cincinnati Bengals, you went on the road on Monday Night Football, and congrats to you. Congrats to Zach Taylor. Shout out to you guys for winning one of the most entertaining games this year. Looks like Jake Browning is a legitimate quarterback. Like, Troy Aikman was literally in awe of this guy the whole broadcast, and he was like, this guy doesn't look panicked. He doesn't look hurried. And all he's doing is, okay, Jamar, okay, T. Higgins over there. And his completion percentage was ridiculous. And he wasn't making any of the same rookie mistakes he made in the first. And then has Joe Burrow in his ear at every time he walks onto the sideline. So for the Cincinnati Bengals, you lost to the Texans and you lost to the Steelers already, which is probably going to hurt your playoff chances, but they're still very much alive in the mix. And if you're the Steelers and you have to play them again, this is not a team, if you have to make the playoffs, that you want to face.
No, I want to give a lot of credit to Jake Browning because I think he completed 80% of his passes. At one point, he had as many touchdowns as incompletions at that point. Give him a lot of credit there. He threw a beautiful ball to Jamar Chase that ended up being that 76-yard touchdown as well. Joe Mixon in this game played out of his mind. Probably the best Joe Mixon game we've had all year, to be honest. And then you had credit to Zach Taylor, where he does not have a great record without Joe Burrow historically in his career. He went out, he beat a team that is vying for that 1 seed. I understand Trevor Lawrence went down, but even before he did, this was a game that was going back and forth. Give credit to Zach Taylor for motivating the defense, motivating the offense to get everybody ready to rock when it matters. So I give a lot of credit to Zach Taylor there. Give credit to their defense making stops when it mattered. The Bengals, this is a team that everyone said was dead in the water, and now they're here, ready to rock, gonna play some upset ball in the future, and maybe they can still sneak into that 7th seed. We're not entirely sure yet, but give them a lot of credit for being the Jags. The Jags definitely could have used this win more than they could.
Yeah, the Jags definitely could have used this win a lot more than the Bengals could, but the Bengals still are alive in that playoff race, and you are a few games down behind these other teams, but Houston and that loss to them is really going to be the difference here, where Joe Burrow threw a couple of interceptions where it really cost them the game. But Jake Browning, it does look like he is a legitimate backup quarterback. And then 32 for 37, 353 passing yards and a touchdown for your second game versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. I don't even think it was just the Jags playing bad defense. I think it was Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Joe Mixon going out there making big plays. So credit to Zach Taylor, credit to Lou Anarumo for getting that stop. And then for the Jags, CJ Beathard looked a lot better than I thought. We'll see how he progresses, but without Trevor Lawrence there, you did beat the Colts twice. So if you are tied with them, you would still win the division there. And then Houston, if they beat Indianapolis, maybe they could squeak in to be the division winners. That Carolina Panthers loss is really what's going to come back to haunt them at the end of it, because if they don't lose that game, they would have a chance to win the division. So I still think they can. Their last tough game is Cleveland, and then the last 3 games are against bad teams. But overall, Trevor, please come back, because the AFC playoffs is counting on it.
We need him there, especially with Joe Burrow being down, especially with the Bills potentially not going into the playoffs either. You need Trevor Lawrence. You need your stars there. And as great of a story as it would be for the Broncos to make it, great as a story as it would be for the Texans to make it, and some of these other teams that are vying for it, the Bengals even, you need to have your stars there. And Trevor Lawrence there makes the playoffs a hell of a lot more interesting when you're talking about legacies, head-to-head matchups, Patrick Mahomes versus Trevor Lawrence, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, whoever it might be. The NFL needs you, especially in the playoffs.
Especially in the playoffs, and consider yourself recapped if you stayed till the end of this video on YouTube. We really appreciate it. If you're listening to this podcast and you've gotten to the end, we are on YouTube right now. We do have the full podcast out, so make sure you go there and check us out. Watch the whole podcast. Fall asleep, leave it on at night so we get that watch time. Everything helps, and we do appreciate all of our listeners here. You guys are the best fans. You guys are a part of the next big up-and-coming sports podcast and sports media company and brand. So we appreciate all of you for being here early. So appreciate that. If you can, check us out on YouTube and give us a sub there and a subscribe. But you have been recapped. Thank you for tuning in, and we will catch you when we preview you for the playoffs and the MVP race.